At my wife Kendra's ultrasound appointment, the room should have been filled with the rhythmic swoosh of a heartbeat, the sound of new life. Instead, it was filled with the terrifying sound of Doctor Aris's heavy breathing, his hands usually steady as a surgeon's shook so violently that the plastic probe rattled against the expensive machine. He did not smile. He did not offer congratulations. He leaned in close to my ear, his voice dropping to a trembling whisper that chilled my blood. "Sir, you need to leave immediately and call a lawyer. Do not go home." I felt my stomach drop, and I asked him if something was wrong with the baby. He looked at the door to make sure the nurse had gone, then whispered back, "The baby is fine, but what I am seeing on this screen tells me your wife is being murdered in slow motion." When he turned the monitor to show me the jagged lines of her uterus, I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply nodded, walked out of there without a word, and never looked back. My name is Alonzo Hayes, 68 years old. Most people look at me and see just another retired man with gray hair and a slow walk. They see my calloused hands and assume I am simple. My own family sees a walking bank account that is taking too long to expire. They think because I put down my hammer and sold my construction company for 9 figures that my mind has gone soft. They mistake my silence for senility. That is their fatal error. I built half the skyline of Chicago with these 2 hands dealing with corrupt unions, mob enforcers, and city inspectors who wanted a piece of the pie. I know how to spot a rotten foundation long before the house collapses. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my life prepared me for the rot I found growing inside my own home. Before I tell you how I brought the whole house down on top of them, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight a war inside your own living room. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a private clinic on the outskirts of the city. I had insisted we come here to Doctor Aris instead of the fancy downtown specialist my son-in-law Gavin had recommended. Gavin had been so helpful lately, always suggesting doctors mixing drinks, handling the bills. I thought he was finally stepping up. I was a fool. My wife Kendra was lying on the examination table, the paper crinkling under her as she shifted. She is 32, beautiful, and the only person in this world who looks at me with love instead of calculation. Her eyes were closed, a soft smile playing on her lips as she waited to hear our child. This pregnancy was our miracle. After 3 years of trying of disappointment, this was supposed to be our moment. But Dr. Aris was not smiling. I have known Aris for 20 years. I built his first clinic when he was just starting out. I have seen him handle car crash victims and gunshot wounds with steady hands. I have seen him deliver bad news to families with a calm grace. Today he looked like he had seen a ghost. He was sweating. Beads of perspiration had formed on his forehead, glistening under the fluorescent lights. He suddenly turned off the main monitor that faced Kendra, cutting the image to black. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her eyes fluttering open. Aris forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Just a technical glitch with the display, Kendra. Just close your eyes and relax for a moment. I need to calibrate the depth." She obeyed him, trusting and innocent. Aris turned to the nurse, a young woman who looked confused. "Can you go check the breaker in the hall? I think we are losing power to the secondary unit." "Take your time." As soon as the door clicked shut, the air in the room seemed to vanish. Aris rolled his stool closer to me, his knees almost touching mine. The smell of fear was coming off him, a sharp metallic scent mixed with antiseptic. He pointed to the grainy black and white image on his private screen, the one Kendra could not see. "Look at the uterine lining, Alonzo. Look closely." I leaned in. I know blueprints. I know structural integrity. I know what a solid wall looks like, and I know what a crumbling one looks like. The image on the screen looked like a wall that had been taken to with a sledgehammer. The lining was thin, jagged, and uneven. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice low so Kendra wouldn't hear. "Is it a defect?" Aris shook his head violently. "No, this isn't natural thinning. This is chemical erosion. I see traces of heavy scarring consistent with long-term exposure to mifepristone." The word hung in the air like smoke. Mifepristone. I knew that word. I watched the news. It was the abortion pill. But Kendra wanted this baby more than anything. She sang to her belly every night. She had already bought a crib. Aris continued, his whisper urgent and terrified. "Someone is microdosing her, Alonzo. Just enough to weaken the sac. Just enough to cause a miscarriage that looks natural. If she goes into labor now, or if the dosage increases even slightly, the uterine wall will rupture. She will bleed out in minutes. This is not a medical condition." This is an assassination attempt. My blood ran cold. The room spun. Suddenly a memory flashed in my mind. Every morning, Gavin, my son-in-law, the man who lived in my guest house, the man who called me Dad, would bring Kendra a special green smoothie. "Here, Kendra," he would say with that charming smile of his. "It is full of iron and folic acid. Good for the baby." He insisted on making it himself. He would not let the housekeeper touch the blender. He was feeding her poison. He was smiling at her, asking about her day, and feeding her death in a glass. I felt a rage building in my chest that I haven't felt since my days on the iron sites, a hot, blinding fury that wanted to tear the room apart. I wanted to roar. I wanted to drive home and wrap my hands around Gavin's neck until the light went out of his eyes. But I pushed it down. I swallowed the scream that was clawing at my throat. If I panicked, Kendra would panic. If she panicked, her blood pressure would spike, and with her uterus in this condition, I might lose them both right there on the table. I stood up. My knees didn't hurt anymore. The arthritis that usually plagued me was gone, replaced by pure adrenaline. I squeezed Aris's shoulder. His eyes were wide, begging me not to do anything rash. "Print the file," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was calm, deadly calm. "Print it and then delete it from your system. Make it look like a routine checkup." "But Alonzo, you have to go to the police," Aris hissed. "Not yet," I said. "If I go to the police now, they will arrest him, he will make bail, and he will hire a lawyer who will claim Kendra took the pills herself. He will drag her name through the mud. Number one, I need to catch him. I need to bury him." I walked back to the table. Kendra opened her eyes. "Is everything okay, baby?" she asked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. I looked at my wife, the woman I loved more than life itself, and I lied to her. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I summoned every ounce of strength I had to produce a warm, reassuring smile. "Everything is perfect, honey. The doctor just says you are a little dehydrated and the lining is a bit thin. You need extreme rest, no stress. And we need to change your diet immediately. No more green smoothies." She frowned. "But Gavin says they are good for me." I took her hand and kissed it. "The doctor knows best. From now on, I make your meals." We walked to the parking lot. The sun was shining, birds were singing, but the world looked gray to me. The colors had drained out of everything. I helped her into my old Ford pickup truck. Gavin hated this truck. He called it an eyesore. He drove a Porsche that I paid for. I got in the driver's seat, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. As I reached up to adjust the rear-view mirror, a flash of sunlight hit something on the dashboard. It was tiny, a faint red light blinking from behind the air vent. I froze. I know construction. I know wiring. That wasn't factory standard. I looked closer, peering through the plastic slats of the vent. A small black box hardwired into the electrical system of the truck. A GPS tracker. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Gavin. He wasn't just poisoning my wife. He was tracking us. He wanted to make sure we went to the doctor he recommended, the one he probably paid off or tricked. He needed to know where we were every second of the day. He was watching us right now. He was probably looking at a dot on his phone, wondering why we were at this clinic and not the one downtown. My hand hovered over the vent. My instinct was to rip the plastic off and smash the device. I wanted to destroy it, but I stopped. If I destroyed it, he would know that I knew. He would know the game was up. He would panic, and a panicked rat is dangerous. He might try something desperate. He might try to hurt Kendra immediately. I pulled my hand back. I left the tracker there, blinking like a mechanical evil eye. Let him watch. Let him think he is the predator. Let him think I am just a stupid old man driving his pregnant wife home. He has no idea that the prey has just become the hunter. I started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, a deep, angry sound. "Where are we going?" Kendra asked. "Home." I looked at the road ahead. It wasn't just a road anymore. It was a battlefield. "Yes," I said. "We are going home." But I wasn't going home to rest. I was going home to war. I was going into the lion's den, and I was bringing nothing but my wits and the terrible secret burning in my pocket. Gavin had started a game of chess with a man who built the board he was standing on. He thought he was winning. He didn't know I was about to burn the whole table down. The drive back to my estate was the longest 5 miles of my life. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Beside me, Kendra was dozing off, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the morning. I glanced at the dashboard where the black GPS tracker was still blinking a silent red eye that mocked me. Gavin was watching. He knew exactly how fast we were moving. He knew we had taken the scenic route. He was probably pacing the foyer right now, checking his watch, wondering why the trip from the clinic took 20 minutes longer than it should have. I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the estate. I had welded these gates myself 30 years ago. Back then, they represented safety and success. They were a symbol that Alonzo Hayes, the boy from the Southside Projects, had made it. Now, as they swung open with a heavy groan, they felt like the doors of a prison cell closing behind me. I parked the truck next to Gavin's shiny Porsche. The contrast made me sick. My truck was covered in dust and drywall residue, a testament to hard work. His car was polished to a mirror shine paid for by the allowance I gave my daughter. Before I could even turn off the engine, the front door of the mansion flew open. Gavin stepped out. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, looking every inch the concerned son-in-law. But I saw the tension in his shoulders. I saw the way his eyes darted to Kendra's stomach before they met my face. He wasn't looking for a baby bump. He was looking for signs of a tragedy. He hurried down the steps, his face arranged into a mask of exaggerated worry. "Dad, you have been gone for hours," Gavin said, reaching out to open Kendra's door. We were getting worried. Did the doctor find something? Is everything okay with the pregnancy? He didn't ask how Kendra was feeling. He asked about the pregnancy. He asked about the obstacles standing between him and my fortune. I got out of the truck, moving slowly, letting my shoulders slump. I needed him to see a tired, defeated old man. I needed him to think his plan was working. "The doctor says she is very weak, Gavin," I said, keeping my voice raspy. "He says the baby is fragile. We almost lost it today." I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes just for a fraction of a second before he covered it with fake sympathy. "Oh no, that is terrible. But the baby is still there." "Still there," I said. "But she needs total bed rest, no stress, no excitement, and absolutely no store-bought food." Gavin nodded eagerly. "Of course. We will take care of her. I will make sure she gets her smoothies every morning. They are crucial for her strength." I wanted to punch his teeth down his throat. I wanted to scream that I knew exactly what was in those green smoothies. Instead, I patted his shoulder. "You are a good man, Gavin. Thank you." We walked into the house. The foyer was grand with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that cost more than my first house. My daughter Jasmine was sitting on the velvet sofa scrolling through her phone. She didn't get up. She didn't rush to hug her mother. She just looked up with an expression of mild annoyance. Finally, Jasmine said, "I have a Pilates instructor coming in 20 minutes. I need the living room cleared." "What did the doctor say? Is it over?" The cruelty of her question took my breath away. Is it over? Not is the baby okay? Not is mom okay? Is it over? She was talking about the pregnancy like it was a tedious television show she wanted to cancel. Kendra looked at Jasmine with hurt in her eyes, but she was too tired to fight. I signaled for the housekeeper to help Kendra up to the master bedroom. Once my wife was out of earshot, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It became colder, sharper. Jasmine stood up and walked over to me, waving a piece of paper. "Since you are finally back, you need to sign this check, Dad. The pool heater is acting up again. The repair guy says we need a whole new system. It is $12,000. I looked at my daughter. She was 30 years old, healthy and capable. Yet she stood there with her hand out demanding money like a spoiled teenager. She had never worked a real day in her life. I had given her everything, private schools, cars, this house, and in return she treated me like an ATM that was malfunctioning. "I paid for the pool maintenance last month, Jasmine," I said, walking past her toward the kitchen. "Maybe if you and Gavin got jobs, you could pay for your own heated swimming pool." Gavin stepped in front of me, blocking my path. His smile was tight. "Come on, Dad. You know the market is tough right now. My hedge fund is just going through a restructuring phase. We are about to close a big deal." I knew about his hedge fund. I had my investigators look into it months ago. It was a shell company. He wasn't managing money. He was gambling it away on high-risk crypto schemes and sports betting. He was drowning in debt, and he was using my money to stay afloat. "Restructuring," I scoffed. "Is that what they call being broke these days?" Jasmine slammed the invoice onto the marble island. "Stop being so stingy, Dad. You are sitting on a mountain of cash. What are you saving it for? You are 68 years old. You can't take it with you." There it was, the ugly truth. They were counting the days. They looked at me and saw an expiration date. "I am saving it for my son," I said quietly. The room went deadly silent. The word hung in the air. "Son!" Jasmine's face twisted in anger. That thing isn't even born yet, and you don't even know if it is a boy. It is a boy, I lied. The doctor confirmed it today. I watched the blood drain from Gavin's face. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He knew the terms of my will better than I did. I had set up the trust 5 years ago before I met Kendra, back when I thought I would die alone. The clause was simple. If I had no male heir, the entire estate would be divided between Jasmine and Charity. But if I had a son of Hayes to carry on the name, he would inherit 70% of the empire. Jasmine would get a comfortable stipend, but she would never control the capital. 70%. That was $50 million. That was the price tag on Kendra's belly. That was why Gavin's hands shook. That was why he was poisoning my wife. He wasn't just killing a baby. He was trying to stop a $50 million loss. Well, Gavin stammered, his voice cracking. That is great news, Dad. A son. Wow. He walked over to the refrigerator, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. You look parched, Dad. You have had a long day. Let me make you something. Some fresh orange juice. I just bought a crate of organic oranges. I leaned against the counter watching him. I watched him take a knife and slice the oranges. I watched him turn his back to me to load the juicer. His body blocked my view for just a few seconds. It was a clumsy sleight of hand. He was reaching into his pocket. I heard the faint click of a small plastic container opening. The sound was softer than a whisper, but to my ears it sounded like a gunshot. He was dosing me too. He turned back around the juicer, whirring loudly, masking the silence in the room. He poured the bright orange liquid into a tall glass. He smiled, and this time the smile didn't reach his eyes at all. His eyes were dead. Here you go, Dad, he said, sliding the glass across the granite counter. Vitamin C, good for the heart. I looked at the glass. It looked delicious. It looked innocent. But I knew that inside that sweet liquid was the same chemical cocktail that was thinning my wife's uterus and making my hands shake. He wanted me confused. He wanted me weak. He wanted me compliant until the day I died. I picked up the glass. It was cold in my hand. Thank you, Gavin, I said. You are always thinking of my health. I brought the glass to my lips. I saw him hold his breath. He was watching me with the intensity of a vulture waiting for a carcass to stop moving. I let the smell of the oranges fill my nose. Then I lowered the glass. Actually, I said, I have some paperwork to review in my study. I will drink it in there. Disappointment flashed across his face, but he nodded quickly. Sure, take your time. I walked out of the kitchen, feeling their eyes on my back. I could feel Jasmine's hatred and Gavin's desperation burning into my skin. I walked down the hallway to my private study, the one room in the house they were not allowed to enter. I closed the heavy oak door and locked it. I moved to the large potted ficus tree in the corner. I am sorry, old friend, I whispered to the tree. I poured the entire glass of orange juice into the soil. The liquid seeped into the dirt, vanishing instantly. I wondered how long it would take for the leaves to turn yellow and fall off. A day a week. That was how long I had. I went to my desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a false bottom I had installed myself. I pried it open and pulled out an old Nokia phone. It was a burner phone, unregistered, untraceable. I had kept it from my days dealing with the unions and the shady city planners. I checked the battery. It was still good. I typed a message to a number I hadn't called in 10 years. The contact name was simply Ray. Ray was a man who used to fix problems that couldn't be fixed legally. He was a private investigator now, but he still knew how to operate in the shadows. The message was short. Wolf in the house. Need a full sweep for bugs. And I need a lab test on a liquid sample. Come to the back entrance at midnight. I hit send. I sat back in my leather chair and looked at the empty glass on my desk. My hands were not shaking anymore. The fear was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They wanted a senile old man. They wanted a victim. They had no idea they had just declared war on a man who built skyscrapers out of steel and grit. I looked at the family portrait on my desk, a picture taken years ago when I thought Jasmine actually loved me. I turned the frame face down. The time for family was over. The time for survival had begun. I took a deep breath, stood up, and prepared to play the role of my life. I would be the confused old man. I would be the victim. I would let them think they were winning right up until the moment I tightened the noose around their necks. I unlocked the study door and stepped back out into the hallway, ready for the next round. The hardest part of construction has never been the building. Any man with a strong back and a hammer can put up a wall. The hardest part is the demolition. It is watching something you spent years creating be reduced to dust and rubble so you can start over. That evening at dinner, I had to become the wrecking ball of my own dignity. I had to destroy the image of Alonzo Hayes, the strong, sharp businessman, and replace him with a confused, stumbling old man who could barely hold a fork. It was the only way to make them drop their guard. It was the only way to survive. We were sitting at the long mahogany dining table. The air conditioner was humming, but the room felt suffocated by the heat of their secrets. Gavin was cutting his steak with precise surgical movements. Jasmine was texting under the table. Kendra was picking at her salad, looking pale and exhausted. I knew I had to make my move. I let my hands start to tremble. It wasn't hard. The rage vibrating in my bones made the shaking almost natural. I reached for the heavy crystal water pitcher. I gripped the handle, then deliberately let my fingers go limp. The pitcher slipped. It hit the edge of my porcelain plate before crashing onto the floor. Water and shards of crystal exploded everywhere, soaking the Persian rug I had bought in Morocco 20 years ago. "Oh God," Jasmine shrieked, jumping up as water splashed her designer heels. "Dad, what is wrong with you? You are making a mess." I sat there staring blankly at the puddle. I didn't apologize. I didn't offer to clean it up. I just looked at Gavin with cloudy, confused eyes. "I am sorry, Arthur," I said, my voice wavering. I think my hand just gave up. The room went dead silent. Gavin froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Who is Arthur?" Jasmine asked, her voice sharp and accusatory. "His name is Gavin, Dad. You have known him for 5 years. Why did you call him Arthur?" I blinked slowly, feigning confusion. "Arthur. Gavin. Yes. The boy who drives the car." I saw Gavin and Jasmine exchange a look. It wasn't a look of concern. It was a look of excitement. It was the look a predator gives when it sees the gazelle limp. They bought it. They thought the poison was already frying my neural pathways. They thought the dementia narrative they wanted to spin was becoming a reality. "I am just tired," I muttered, pushing my chair back. "I need to use the restroom." I shuffled down the hall, dragging my feet like the residents I had seen in those cheap nursing homes Gavin admired. I went into the guest bathroom, the one right off the living room. I made sure to leave the door wide open. I stood there staring at the mirror, fixing my collar, doing absolutely nothing of substance, but letting them see me standing there confused, forgetting basic social norms like privacy. From the reflection in the mirror, I saw Jasmine wrinkle her nose in disgust. "Oh my God, Gavin, look at him. He is leaving the door open. He is losing it. It is getting embarrassing." "Let him be, babe," Gavin said, his voice low but carrying clearly down the hall. "It is actually better this way. If he is deteriorating this fast, the judge will have no choice but to grant the conservatorship. We just need to document it." I washed my hands, letting the water run for a long time, listening to the sound of my own humiliation. It burned. I was a man who commanded respect. I was a man who walked onto job sites and made grown men straighten their backs. Now I was playing the fool in my own castle. But I washed the shame down the drain with the soap. Let them think I am broken. Broken things are ignored. And being ignored was exactly what I needed. After dinner, I announced I was going to bed early. I shuffled up the stairs, gripping the banister with both hands, panting theatrically. I went into my bedroom, closed the door loudly, and waited. I counted to 100. Then I took off my shoes. I moved across the hardwood floor in my socks. I didn't make a sound. I built this house. I knew which floorboards creaked. I knew which doors needed oil. I moved like a ghost in the machine. I slipped out of my room and crept down the hallway to the utility closet that housed the central heating unit. It was a small, cramped space right behind the wall of the main living room. I had insulated this room myself with extra fiberglass, but I had left a small ventilation gap near the ceiling for airflow. It acted like a perfect amplifier for anyone speaking in the lounge. I squeezed myself into the dark space between the water heater and the wall. The air was hot and smelled of dust and copper. My knees ached as I crouched down, but I didn't move. Through the vent, their voices came through crystal clear. "We can't wait 6 months, Gavin was saying. "The liquid assets are drying up. I have the loan sharks breathing down my neck, Jasmine. If we don't get control of his accounts by the end of the month, we lose everything." "But the baby," Jasmine said. Her voice didn't sound protective. It sounded calculating. "If Kendra has the baby, the 70% clause kicks in. Even if we put Dad in a home, the trust fund is locked for the heir." "That is why the baby won't make it," Gavin said. His voice was so cold it made the sweat on my neck turn to ice. The doctor said she is weak. Nature will take its course. And if nature needs a little push, well, tragedies happen. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from roaring. My own daughter, my flesh and blood. She was sitting there drinking wine, listening to her husband plan the murder of her unborn brother, and she wasn't screaming. She wasn't calling the police. What about the facility, Jasmine asked. I found a place in the valley, Gavin replied. It is called Sunnyvale. It is state-funded. Low security, minimal staff. Once he is in there with his condition documented, nobody will listen to him. He will just be another crazy old man ranting about conspiracies. We sell this house, liquidate the construction bonds, and we are free, Jasmine. We can finally live the life we deserve, the life they deserved. They thought they deserved the sweat off my brow. They thought they deserved the blood from my veins. I closed my eyes in the darkness of the utility closet. A single tear rolled down my cheek. It wasn't for me. It was for the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. That girl was dead. She had died a long time ago, replaced by this monster who measured love in dollar signs. I stayed in that closet for another hour until they finally went upstairs to their wing of the house. When the house was finally silent, the real work began. It was 3 a.m, the witching hour, the time when secrets are kept and lives are stolen. I crept out of the utility closet, my body stiff but my mind razor sharp. I went to the kitchen first. I opened the pantry and found the jar of sugar I had bought days ago and hidden behind the flour. I filled a small Ziploc bag with the white granules. Then I moved up the stairs. The carpet runner muffled my footsteps. I reached Gavin and Kendra's bedroom door. My heart hammered against my ribs. If Gavin woke up, if he saw me, the charade would be over. It would turn physical, and while I was strong, he was young and desperate. But I had no choice. I turned the handle. Locked. Of course. Gavin wasn't stupid, but neither was I. This was my house. I installed these locks. I pulled a thin, stiff wire from my pocket. It took me 3 seconds to pop the mechanism. The door swung open silently. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains. I could hear Gavin's heavy snoring. Kendra was breathing softly beside him. I moved to the ensuite bathroom. I didn't turn on the light. I knew exactly where everything was. I opened the medicine cabinet. There it was, the bottle of prenatal vitamins. The bottle Gavin insisted on refilling for her because he cared so much. I took the bottle and uncapped it. I poured the capsules into my hand. They were white, powdery capsules, easy to tamper with. I took the sample vial Ray had given me. I carefully opened one of the capsules and poured the powder into the vial. This was the evidence. This was the smoking gun. Then I took the bag of sugar I had brought. I spent the next 10 minutes in the dark, sweating carefully, emptying the poison from the remaining capsules into the toilet and refilling them with sugar. It was tedious, terrifying work. My hands wanted to shake, but I forced them to be steady. I was a surgeon operating on a bomb. One slip, one noise, and everything blew up. When I was done, I recapped the bottle and placed it back on the shelf exactly where I found it. I flushed the toilet, timing it with the rumble of the house's plumbing cycle so it wouldn't sound suspicious. I crept back out of the room, locking the door behind me. I went back to my study and hid the vial of poison in the false bottom of my desk drawer right next to the burner phone. I sat there for a moment, waiting for my heart rate to slow down. I looked at my hands. They were covered in a fine white dust, sugar, and poison. The difference between life and death was so small, so easy to hide. I went to the window and looked out at the dark estate. The GPS tracker in my truck was still blinking in the driveway. Gavin thought he had me trapped. He thought I was a senile old man pissing on the rug and forgetting names. He didn't know that I had just neutralized his weapon. Tomorrow Kendra would take her vitamins and she would be ingesting nothing but sugar. She would get stronger. The baby would get stronger. And Gavin would be confused. He would wonder why the bleeding stopped. He would wonder why the tragedy wasn't happening. Let him wonder. Confusion breeds mistakes. And when he made a mistake, I would be there waiting in the shadows with a sledgehammer. The demolition had begun, but I wasn't the one who was going to crumble. The morning sun was streaming through the sheer curtains of the living room, but it brought no warmth to the house. The air was thick with a tension that felt like static electricity before a thunderstorm. I was sitting in my leather armchair staring at the dust motes dancing in the light, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. The tremor was fake, but the exhaustion was real. Playing the role of a senile old man was more tiring than pouring concrete for 12 hours straight. My muscles ached from the constant act of hunching over and shuffling my feet. I heard footsteps approaching. They were soft and deliberate, like a hunter stalking a wounded animal. Gavin walked into the room. He was holding a large manila envelope in his hand. He looked pained. He looked like a man who was about to put a sick dog down and wanted everyone to know how much it hurt him. He sat down on the ottoman opposite me and sighed heavily. The sound was so theatrical I almost laughed, but I kept my mouth slightly open and my eyes unfocused. "Dad, we need to talk," Gavin said, his voice dripping with synthetic concern. "I found something. I did not want to show you this. God knows I did not want to be the one to break your heart. But you have a right to know. You have a right to know who you are leaving your legacy to." I blinked slowly, looking from his face to the envelope. "What is it, Arthur?" I asked, using the wrong name again just to see his jaw tighten. "It is Gavin, Dad," he corrected patiently. "And this is about Kendra." He slid the envelope across the coffee table. I reached for it, making my hand shake violently, so it took me 2 tries to grasp the paper. I pulled out a stack of photographs. They were large, high-resolution prints. My eyes scanned them. They showed Kendra, my beautiful, loyal Kendra. She was in a parking lot somewhere, standing next to a tall, athletic black man in a hoodie. In one photo, they were hugging. In another, his hand was on her stomach. In the third and most damning one, they appeared to be kissing deeply. I looked at the photos. Then I looked closer. I spent 40 years looking at blueprints. I know how to spot a structural flaw from a mile away. I know when a shadow falls the wrong way. I know when a perspective line does not vanish correctly. These photos were good, very good, but they were fake. The lighting on Kendra's face came from the left, but the shadow on the pavement fell to the right. The man's hand on her stomach looked slightly too large for his arm, a classic perspective error in digital manipulation. And the kiss. Her hair was blowing east, but his hoodie strings were hanging straight down. It was a digital composite, a lie printed on glossy paper. But I could not say that. I could not point out the pixelation errors. I had to be the jealous, confused old husband. I had to be the cuckold they wanted me to be. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice rising in pitch. "Who is this man touching my wife?" Gavin leaned forward. "His name is Tyrell. He is a fitness instructor. We found out Kendra has been seeing him for months, since before she got pregnant, Dad." He let the implication hang in the air like a foul smell. He did not say it outright. He wanted me to say it. He wanted me to connect the dots he had drawn. "The baby," I whispered. Gavin nodded slowly, looking down at his hands. "We did the math, Dad. You are 68. Your count was low years ago. The doctor said it was a miracle. Maybe it wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was just nature finding a way with a younger man. The rage that hit me then was not fake. It was not acting. It was a white, hot fury that started in my gut and burned its way up my throat. How dare he? How dare he question the legitimacy of my son? How dare he slander my wife's honor with his cheap computer tricks? I wanted to reach across the table and snap his neck, but I channeled that rage. I took that fire and I poured it into the performance of a lifetime. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over backward with a loud crash. I threw the photos at him. They fluttered through the air like dead leaves. "Liar," I screamed. My voice cracked and broke. She said she loved me. She said I was the only one. "Dad, please calm down," Gavin said, standing up and backing away, his hands raised. "I know it hurts. Get her down here," I roared. "Get her down here now." I grabbed a porcelain vase from the mantelpiece. It was a Qing Dynasty replica, worth $5,000. I did not hesitate. I hurled it against the wall. It shattered into a million pieces, the sound exploding through the quiet house like a bomb. The noise brought them running. Jasmine appeared at the top of the stairs. She was holding her phone up, filming. The red record light was on. She wasn't running to help. She was running to document the violent outburst of her demented father. Perfect. I would give her a show. I overturned the coffee table, sending books and coasters flying. I kicked the ottoman. I was a tornado of destruction. "Where is she?" I bellowed, my face turning purple. Kendra ran into the room. She was wearing her morning robe, her hair messy from sleep. She looked terrified. Her eyes went from the broken vase to me, then to the photos scattered on the floor. "Alonzo, what is happening?" she cried. I marched toward her. I saw Gavin tense up, ready to intervene if I actually hit her, ready to play the hero. I stopped inches from her face. I was breathing hard, my chest heaving. I pointed a trembling finger at the photos. "You traitor," I screamed. "Is it his? Is the bastard his?" Kendra looked down at the photos. Confusion washed over her face. "Who is that? I do not know who that is." "Alonzo, this is not real. Don't lie to me," I yelled, drowning out her voice. "I gave you everything. I took you out of that apartment. I gave you a life, and you give me another man's brat." I saw the tears well up in her eyes, real tears. She was hurt. She was confused. She thought the man she loved had finally lost his mind. It broke my heart to see her like that. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to hug her, to tell her it was a lie, to wipe the tears away. But the camera was rolling. Jasmine was zooming in. Gavin was watching. I grabbed Kendra by the shoulders. I gripped her hard. I shook her once, not violently but firmly. And then I did it. I leaned in close as if I was going to scream in her face again. But instead of screaming, I locked eyes with her. For 1 second, I dropped the mask. I stopped the shaking. I looked at her with the sharp, clear intensity of the man she married. I squeezed her upper arm in a specific pattern. 3 short pulses. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. It was a signal we had developed years ago when we went to boring charity galas. It meant, "I love you, play along." Her eyes widened. She froze. She felt the signal. She saw the clarity in my eyes. She saw that I wasn't crazy. I was calculating. Then just as quickly, the mask slammed back down. "Get out of my sight," I screamed, pushing her away toward the door. "Go to your room and stay there. I do not want to see your face." Kendra stumbled back. She was a good actress too, or maybe the fear was still lingering. She covered her face with her hands and ran out of the room, sobbing loudly. I stood there in the middle of the wreckage, panting. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I looked around the room. The vase was dust. The table was overturned. The photos were everywhere. It looked like a war zone. Jasmine lowered her phone. She looked at Gavin and nodded. A small, satisfied smirk played on her lips. They had it. They had the video of Alonzo Hayes losing his mind, violently attacking his pregnant wife and destroying property. This was the final nail in the coffin for my competency hearing. Gavin walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. His touch made my skin crawl. "It is okay, Dad," he said softly, his voice thick with fake sympathy. "You did the right thing. She deserved that. You need to rest now. Your heart rate is too high." He guided me back to the armchair that I had tipped over. He set it upright. I sat down, burying my face in my hands, pretending to weep. "I am sorry," I mumbled into my palms. "I do not know what came over me. I loved her so much." "I know," Gavin said. "I know. But do not worry. Jasmine and I are here. We will take care of everything. We will talk to the lawyers. We will make sure that baby does not get a dime of your hard-earned money." He walked away to join Jasmine in the hallway. I heard them whispering high fives in their voices. "Did you get the part where he pushed her?" Jasmine whispered. "Yes," Gavin replied. "And the part where he smashed the vase? The judge is going to grant the emergency order by Monday. He is dangerous, Jasmine. We are doing the right thing." They walked off toward the kitchen, probably to celebrate with a bottle of my best wine. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the shards of my own destruction. I lifted my head from my hands. My eyes were dry. My breathing slowed. I looked at the spot where I had squeezed Kendra's arm. I hoped she understood. I hoped she trusted me enough to wait. I looked down at one of the photos near my foot. The face of the man they had photoshopped next to my wife. It was a good effort, but they forgot one thing. Kendra hated hoodies. She said they looked sloppy. She would never date a man who wore a hoodie to a date. "Amateurs," I whispered to the empty room. I was not just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for my wife's honor. They had tried to paint her as a whore and me as a madman. They had handed me the weapons I needed. By filming my outburst, they thought they were documenting my demise. In reality, they were documenting the lengths they drove me to. When I revealed the truth about the poison and the gaslighting, this video would not look like dementia. It would look like the righteous anger of a man who is being tortured in his own home. I stood up and kicked the fake photo under the sofa. I needed to get to the burner phone. I needed to tell Ray to run a background check on the man in the photo. If they used a stock image, I would find it. If they hired an actor, I would find him. And when I found him, I would make him sing. The battle lines were drawn. They had struck a heavy blow today, but I was still standing, and now I knew exactly how low they were willing to go. There was no bottom to their greed, which meant there would be no limit to my retribution. I straightened my shirt, dusted off my pants, and walked toward the stairs. It was time to check on my wife and make sure she knew that the war was far from over. The vibration of the burner phone in my pocket felt like a second heartbeat against my thigh. It was a dull rhythm that I had been waiting for all day. I was sitting in the library pretending to read a book on European history while Jasmine paced the hallway loudly complaining about the incompetence of the pool cleaners. I waited until her footsteps faded toward the kitchen before I locked the library door. My hands were trembling again. For weeks I had looked at these shaking fingers and felt a deep shame believing that my body was finally betraying me after 68 years of hard labor. I believed the lie that I was withering away. I pulled the phone out and opened the encrypted email from Ray. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained only a chemical breakdown and a single word highlighted in red: thallium. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Thallium. The poisoner's poison. Colorless, odorless, tasteless. It was a heavy metal used in rat poison and ant killer. I sat back in my leather chair and let the phone drop onto the desk. Suddenly everything made sense. The hair I found on my pillow every morning was not male pattern baldness. The numbness in my fingertips that made me drop the water pitcher at dinner was not arthritis or a stroke. The burning sensation in my feet at night was not neuropathy. I was being murdered. My son-in-law was dissolving me from the inside out 1 milligram at a time. The realization should have terrified me, but instead, it brought a wave of cold relief. I was not losing my mind. I was not weak. I was under attack. And unlike old age, which is a battle you cannot win, this was a battle I could fight. I looked at my hands again. They were not the hands of a dying old man. They were the hands of a victim who had just identified his abuser. I picked up the phone again and dialed a number that was not in my contacts. It was a number I had memorized 30 years ago. It rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "This is Stone. Mr. Stone, it is Alonzo. We need to go to a secure line." There was a pause. Stone was the most expensive lawyer in Chicago for a reason. He did not ask questions. He simply switched to our pre-arranged encrypted video channel. His face appeared on my phone screen. He looked older than the last time I saw him, but his eyes were still sharp as razor blades. "Alonzo, I thought you retired to play golf and bounce grandchildren on your knee," Stone said. "You look like hell." "I am in hell, Stone. I sent you a file. Look at it." I watched on the small screen as Stone opened the email I forwarded. I saw his eyebrows knit together. I saw him lean closer to his monitor. When he looked back at me, the professional mask was gone, replaced by genuine horror. "Is this your blood work, Alonzo? Mine and Kendra's? Jesus Christ. You need the police. You need an ambulance." "No. I need a trust." I explained everything to him. I told him about the baby, about the 70% clause, about Gavin and Jasmine and the staged intervention that was coming. Stone listened without interrupting. He took notes furiously, his pen scratching against paper, the only sound in the connection. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "So, you want to trap them?" Stone asked. "I do not just want to trap them. I want to crush them. They want control of my assets. They want to prove I am incompetent so they can take power of attorney. I want to give it to them." Stone looked at me like I was crazy. "You want to give them the company? I want you to draft a reversible living trust. It needs to look exactly like the standard transfer of power document they are going to try to force me to sign. It grants Gavin full control over the Hayes liquidity and assets. But I want a Clause 4B buried in the definitions section." Stone picked up his pen again, a small smile playing on his lips. "Go on." Clause 4B states that upon assuming control of the assets, the trustee also assumes full immediate personal liability for all existing debts attached to the estate and its subsidiaries. And here is the kicker, Stone. I want you to attach the toxic assets from the failed Vegas project we wrote off 10 years ago. The ones with the massive EPA fines pending. Stone started to chuckle. It was a dry, dark sound. "You are evil, Alonzo. If he signs that he becomes personally responsible for $20 million in federal fines the moment the ink is dry." "Exactly. And I want a secondary trigger. The trust is reversible upon the birth of a male heir confirmed by DNA test." So the moment my son is born, the assets revert to him, but the debts stay with Gavin. It is a poison pill, Stone said admiringly. He thinks he is swallowing a golden goose, but he is swallowing a grenade. Draft it. Make it look official. Use the letterhead from the firm they hired the fake one. I will make sure they think it is their idea. Consider it done. But Alonzo, you need to get out of that house. Thallium is cumulative. If he ups the dose, you won't make it to the signing. I have switched the pills. I am safe for now. Just get the papers ready. I ended the call and wiped the phone. I sat in the dark library feeling the weight of the strategy I had just set in motion. It was a dangerous game. I was betting my life that Gavin's greed would blind him to the fine print. I was betting that he was so desperate for the money he wouldn't read the liability clauses. I needed water, real water. I had a stash of bottled water hidden in the false bottom of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I unlocked the library door and stepped out. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was past midnight. Jasmine and Kendra were asleep, but a faint light was coming from the garage. I moved toward it, my socks sliding silently on the marble. The door to the garage was cracked open an inch. I could hear a voice. It was Gavin. He sounded frantic. Please listen to me, Sal. I just need a few more days. I pressed my ear against the gap in the door frame. I could smell the exhaust fumes and the stale odor of cigarette smoke. Gavin never smoked in the house. He was pacing back and forth in front of his Porsche, his shadow stretching long and thin across the concrete floor. No, do not come to the house, Gavin whispered, his voice cracking with panic. The old man is still kicking. He is tough, Sal. The natural causes route is taking too long. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. I could hear the tinny sound of screaming coming from the phone. Whoever Sal was, he was not happy. I know it is 5 million. I know the interest is compounding. Look, Sal, he is losing his mind. We have the intervention scheduled. Once he signs the power of attorney, I can transfer the funds immediately. Monday at the latest. Another pause. Gavin ran his hand through his hair, pulling at it. If I do not pay by Monday. Okay, Sal, I get it. A life for a debt. I understand. He hung up the phone and slumped against the hood of the car. He slid down until he was sitting on the dirty floor, his head in his hands. He looked pathetic. He was a man who had dug a hole so deep he could no longer see the sky. $5 million. He had gambled away everything, and now the sharks were circling. I stood in the shadows watching him. This was the final piece of the puzzle. This was the motive. It wasn't just greed, it was survival. Gavin was a dead man walking. If he didn't get my money by Monday, Sal would kill him. That meant Gavin had a deadline. And because he had a deadline, I had a deadline. He would not wait for the thallium to work slowly anymore. He needed me incapacitated now. He needed that signature this weekend. The accident he was planning, the one he hinted at during the drive, it was going to happen soon, probably tomorrow. I watched him stand up and kick the tire of his car in frustration. He looked wild, dangerous. A desperate man is capable of anything. He would try to kill me. He would try to kill Kendra. He would burn this whole house down if it meant saving his own skin. I backed away from the door slowly. I had to be careful. If he saw me now, if he knew I had heard him, he would attack me right here in the garage. And in my weakened state, I might not win a physical fight against a man 20 years younger. I crept back to the library, my heart pounding. The game had accelerated. It was no longer a chess match. It was a race. I had to stay alive until Monday. I had to survive the accident he was planning. I had to survive the poison. I had to survive the betrayal of my own daughter, who was likely asleep upstairs dreaming of the yachts she would buy with my money. I went back to my desk and opened the drawer. I took out the vial of sugar pills I had swapped. I looked at them. They were my only defense. I had to play the part of the dying man so well that Gavin would think he had already won. I had to make him arrogant. Arrogance causes mistakes, and I needed him to make one big, fatal mistake. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was Wednesday. The intervention was likely planned for Sunday. 4 days to walk through a minefield without triggering an explosion. I thought about Kendra sleeping upstairs, innocent and unaware that her husband was negotiating her death to pay a gambling debt. A fierce protectiveness surged through me. I would not let them touch her. I would not let them touch my sons. I took a deep breath and prepared myself. Tomorrow Gavin would invite me to play golf or go for a drive. He would try to stage an accident. I had to be ready. I had to be stronger than I looked. I had to remember the man I used to be, the man who climbed steel beams in freezing wind, the man who never backed down from a fight. Alonzo Hayes was not dead yet. And come Monday morning, when the trap snapped shut, Gavin would wish he had never met me. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and sat there waiting for the dawn of the war. Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air was heavy and wet. It was the kind of weather that made joints ache and moods sour. I was sitting on the porch finishing a cup of black coffee when the sleek silver nose of Gavin's Porsche pulled up to the curb. He stepped out wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my first car, and a smile that did not reach his dead eyes. "Ready for a boys' day out, Dad?" he called out. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. It grated on my ears like sandpaper. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on my cane. I did not want to go. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay inside the fortress of my home, but I knew the game. If I refused, he would get suspicious. He would think I was onto him. I had to play the part of the lonely, grateful old man who was desperate for his son-in-law's attention. "That sounds nice, Gavin," I said, letting my voice quaver. "I have not been to the club in months." He helped me into the passenger seat of the Porsche. The leather was cold and slippery. As soon as the door closed, the silence of the luxury cabin sealed us in. It felt like a coffin. Gavin slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. It roared to life, a beast waking up. We pulled out of the driveway. At first he drove normally, but as soon as we hit the winding roads that led up to the Canyon Country Club, his demeanor changed. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, his jaw set. The speedometer began to climb, 40, 50, 60. We were in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. Trees blurred past the window in a smear of green and brown. The car hugged the curves tightly, the tires squealing in protest. I gripped the safety handle above the door, my knuckles turning white. This was not a leisurely drive. This was terror. "Gavin, slow down," I gasped, pressing my back into the seat. He did not slow down. He accelerated. We whipped around a hairpin turn so fast the back end of the car fishtailed. The guardrail loomed large for a second, a flash of silver metal separating us from a 100-foot drop. "Sorry, Dad," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "This car just has so much power. Sometimes it is hard to control. Kind of like life, right? One minute you are in control and the next you are spinning out." He looked at me then. He took his eyes off the road for a terrifying 3 seconds. He looked right into my face, searching for fear. He wanted to see the terror of a dying man. He wanted to remind me how fragile my existence was. He was telling me without words that my life was in his hands and he could snuff it out whenever he chose. I gave him what he wanted. I squeezed my eyes shut and let out a whimper. "Please, Gavin. My heart." He laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Then he slammed on the brakes, slowing the car down to a crawl just as we entered the club gates. "Just having a little fun, Dad," he said, patting my knee. "You need to feel alive while you still can." I opened my eyes and looked at him. I saw the disappointment in his face. He had hoped for a heart attack. He had hoped the stress of the drive would finish what the poison had started. But my heart was not weak. It was pounding, yes, but it was pounding with the rhythm of a war drum. We parked and rented a golf cart. The course was empty due to the threatening weather. The wind was whipping off the cliffs, howling through the trees. It was desolate and beautiful and dangerous, perfect for an accident. We played 3 holes in silence. I played badly on purpose, whiffing the ball, hitting it into the sand traps. Gavin watched me with pitying eyes, checking his phone constantly. I knew he was checking the time. He had a deadline. Monday was coming. On the 4th hole, the fairway ran alongside a steep drop-off. Below, jagged rocks jutted out of the churning ocean. The wind was fierce here, tearing at our clothes. Gavin stopped the cart near the edge. "Hey, Dad, look at that view," he said, pointing toward the cliffs. "You used to love this view. Remember?" I nodded and stepped out of the cart. I leaned on my putter, using it for balance. I walked toward the edge, but I stayed a safe distance back. I knew construction. I knew about unstable ground. I knew that one push here would look like a tragic slip. Gavin walked up behind me. I could feel his presence like a cold shadow. The wind roared, masking the sound of his footsteps. "You know, Dad," he said, shouting over the wind, "Jasmine and I have been talking. We think it might be time for you to retire for real. Move somewhere quieter, somewhere with full-time care." I did not turn around. I stared at the waves crashing against the rocks below. "Is that what you want, Gavin?" I asked. "You want to lock me away?" "It is for your own safety," he said, stepping closer. I could feel his breath on my neck. "You are getting confused. You are seeing things. You are breaking things. You are a danger to yourself." He was right behind me now. I tensed my muscles. I shifted my weight to my left foot the way I used to when I was bracing a heavy beam. I knew what was coming. "Why don't you take a closer look, Dad?" he said. I felt his hand on my back. It was not a pat. It was a shove. He pushed me hard toward the edge. In his mind, the script was written. The frail old man would stumble, lose his footing, and tumble onto the rocks below. A tragic accident, a grieving son-in-law, a closed casket. But Alonzo Hayes does not follow scripts written by amateurs. As he pushed, I did not stumble forward. I pivoted. I spun on my heel with the grace of a man who had spent 40 years walking on narrow steel girders in high winds. I dropped my center of gravity and swung my arm backward. I was holding a 9-iron. It was solid steel. I did not hit him. I did not want to go to jail for assault, but I swung that club with the full force of my upper body. The steel head of the club sliced through the air inches from his face. It made a sound like a whip cracking. Whoosh! Gavin stumbled back, terrified by the sudden violence of the movement. He fell onto the grass, scrambling backward on his hands and knees. His face was white as a sheet. He looked up at me, and for the first time he did not see a senile old man. He saw a man standing with his feet planted wide, holding a golf club like a weapon of war. He saw shoulders that were broad and powerful beneath the cardigan. He saw eyes that burned with a cold blue fire. "Careful, Gavin," I said, my voice steady and hard, cutting through the wind. "The grass is slippery here. You could get hurt." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had seen the truth. He had seen the strength I was hiding. I thought you were falling," he stammered, lying through his teeth. "I was trying to catch you." I lowered the club, slowly leaning on it again, resuming my hunch. The mask slipped back into place, but the message had been delivered. "My balance is better than you think, son," I said softly. "I learned to stand my ground before you were even born. Now pick up your ball. You are slowing us down." We finished the round in silence. Gavin kept his distance. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. He could not reconcile the frail old man he saw at dinner with the warrior who had just nearly taken his head off with a 9-iron. Good. Let him be confused. Fear makes people sloppy. The drive home was quiet. He drove the speed limit. When we pulled into the driveway, the sky had finally opened up and rain was falling in sheets. It matched the feeling in my gut. I was exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me with a deep, bone-weary ache. I opened the front door, expecting to hear the familiar click of claws on the hardwood floor. Duke, my 10-year-old golden retriever, usually met me at the door. He was the only living thing in this house besides Kendra that I trusted. He slept at the foot of my bed. He listened to my troubles. "Duke," I called out. "Here, boy." Silence. The house was dark. The rain hammered against the roof. A cold dread settled in my stomach. It was heavier than the fear I felt in the car. I walked into the living room. Kendra was not home. She was at her mother's house for the afternoon, something I had insisted on to get her away from the poison. "Duke." I called again, my voice cracking. I saw something near the French doors leading to the garden. It was a lump of golden fur lying on the Persian rug. It was near the potted ficus tree, the tree where I had poured the orange juice yesterday. No, 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 no. I dropped my cane. I fell to my knees beside him. Duke was lying on his side. His legs were stiff. His eyes were open and glassy. There was a small puddle of vomit near his muzzle. It was orange. He had licked the soil. He had lapped up the poison juice that had overflowed from the pot. I put my hand on his chest. No heartbeat. He was cold. My loyal friend, my innocent boy. He had taken the bullet meant for me. I gathered his heavy, limp body into my arms. I buried my face in his fur and let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. It hurt more than I expected. This dog had been with me since the day I retired. He was family. And he was dead because of Gavin's greed. I heard footsteps behind me. Gavin walked into the room. He stopped when he saw me on the floor. He looked at the dog, then at the potted plant, then at me. "Oh man," he said, his voice flat. "Looks like the old ticker finally gave out." He was old Dad. These things happen. These things happen. That was all he had to say. Not I am sorry. Not what happened. Just these things happen. I looked up at him. Tears were streaming down my face, but behind the tears my eyes were dry ice. I saw him smile, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch of his lips. He was glad. He was glad the dog was dead because it meant the poison worked. It was a field test and it was a success. I will call the landscapers to take care of it, Gavin said, turning to walk away. Do not worry about it, Dad. Get some rest. I watched him walk away. I listened to his footsteps fade up the stairs. I looked down at Duke. I closed his eyes gently. I promise you, I whispered to the silence. I promise you he will pay for this. I did not call the landscapers. I went to the garage and got a shovel. I went out into the pouring rain. I dug the grave myself in the corner of the yard under Duke's favorite oak tree. The rain mixed with the sweat and tears on my face. My muscles burned. My back screamed in protest. But I kept digging. With every shovelful of wet earth, I buried my mercy. I buried my hesitation. Gavin had crossed the final line. He had killed an innocent. He had brought death into my home. I finished burying Duke as the sun went down. I stood over the fresh mound of earth, leaning on the shovel, breathing hard. I was soaked to the bone. I was shivering, but I felt stronger than I had in years. Monday was coming. The intervention. The trap. I went back inside and walked straight to my study. I unlocked the drawer and took out the file Stone had sent me. The Reversible Living Trust. The Poison Pill. I took a pen and signed the bottom line. My signature was bold and steady. You want a war, Gavin? I said to the empty room. You just killed the only thing keeping me human. I looked at the blinking light of the burner phone. I picked it up and typed one message to Stone. It is done. Prepare the ambush. I turned off the light. The house was dark and cold, but the fire inside me was raging. The accident on the cliffs did not kill me. The poison did not kill me. But the death of my dog had killed the last shred of Alonzo Hayes, the father. Now only Alonzo Hayes, the executioner, remained. And on Monday, the executioner would swing his axe. Sunday morning felt less like a day of rest and more like a funeral procession. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath before a scream. I woke up with a headache that thumped in rhythm with my pulse, a lingering souvenir from the thallium still circulating in my blood. I dressed slowly, choosing my best Sunday suit, a navy blue three-piece with a crisp white shirt. If they were going to bury me today, I was going to look like the boss while they held the shovel. I tied my tie with steady hands, ignoring the numbness in my fingertips. I looked in the mirror one last time. The man staring back at me looked tired. His eyes were sunken and his skin was gray, but deep inside those eyes there was a spark of cold blue fire that refused to go out. I walked down the grand staircase, gripping the banister. Below in the living room, the vultures had gathered. Gavin was there wearing a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too tight. Jasmine was sitting on the sofa, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. But they were not alone. There were two strangers in the room. One was a man in a cheap brown suit who smelled of stale coffee and desperation. The other was a woman with a severe haircut and a clipboard. This was it. The intervention. The ambush. "Good morning, Dad." Jasmine said, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Please sit down. We need to have a family meeting." I shuffled into the room, letting my feet drag on the marble. I slumped into the armchair they had positioned in the center of the room like an accused man in the dock. I looked around with wide, confused eyes. "Who are these people, Jasmine?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Is it a party?" "No, Mr. Hayes," the woman with the clipboard said. She spoke to me slowly and loudly as if I were a child or a simpleton. "I am Dr. Evans. I am a geriatric psychiatrist. And this is Mr. Blackwood. He is a court-appointed legal representative." Court-appointed. That was a lie. Gavin had hired him. I could tell by the way the man kept glancing at Gavin for approval. "We are here because we love you, Dad," Gavin said, stepping forward. "We are worried about you. You have been different lately. Violent, confused." "I am not confused," I muttered, gripping the armrests. "I just want my breakfast. Where is Kendra?" "Kendra is in her room," Jasmine said sharply. "She is not part of this. This is about you, Dad." Dr. Evans stepped forward. She did not ask me any questions. She did not check my vitals. She simply looked at her clipboard and started reading a list of symptoms that sounded suspiciously like the script Gavin had written. Mr. Hayes exhibits signs of advanced cognitive decline coupled with paranoid delusions and sudden outbursts of aggression. The incident on Thursday where he attacked his son-in-law with a golf club is a clear indicator that he is a danger to himself and others. Furthermore, the video evidence from Wednesday shows a complete psychotic break. Gavin picked up the remote and pointed it at the 60-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. There I was, red-faced, screaming, throwing the vase, shaking Kendra. It looked bad. Taken out of context without knowing about the fake photos or the poison, I looked like a monster. I looked like a madman terrorizing his family. I watched myself on the screen and I felt a pang of shame. Not because I was crazy, but because I had allowed them to push me this far. I had allowed them to turn me into a spectacle. "Turn it off," I whispered. "Please, turn it off." "It is hard to watch, isn't it?" Dad Jasmine said, sniffing loudly. "But we have to face the truth. You are sick. You need help." Dr. Evans nodded solemnly. "Based on the evidence and the family's testimony, I am prepared to sign an involuntary commitment order. Mr. Hayes needs 24-hour supervision in a secure facility." The words hung in the air. Secure facility. That was code for a state-run hellhole where they would drug me into a stupor and let me rot while they spent my money. I looked at Gavin. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the papers on the coffee table. The hunger in his eyes was naked now. "So what happens now?" I asked, letting my voice break. "Are you sending me away?" "We do not want to," Gavin said. "We want you to stay here. We want you to be comfortable. But we need to make sure the family is protected. We need to make sure the assets are managed by someone competent." Mr. Blackwood. The cheap lawyer cleared his throat and pushed a thick stack of documents across the table toward me. "This is a durable power of attorney and a transfer of trust," he explained. "It grants Mr. Gavin full legal authority over your estate, your bank accounts, and your medical decisions. If you sign this, we can avoid the court hearing. You can stay in your home under the care of private nurses." "And if I don't sign," I asked. Gavin leaned in. The nice guy mask vanished. His face was hard and cruel. "If you don't sign, Dr. Evans signs the commitment papers right now. The police are waiting outside. They will drag you out of here in handcuffs. You will go to Sunnyvale. And Kendra will be on the street by noon." My heart hammered against my ribs. There it was, the leverage. "You wouldn't," I said. "She is pregnant with the baby." "It is not my baby. Remember?" Gavin sneered, using my own fake outrage against me. "You said it yourself. It is probably some trainer's kid. I have no obligation to house a cheating woman and her bastard. Unless you sign. If you sign, she stays. She gets the best doctors. She lives here in luxury." I looked at the papers, then I looked at the stairs. I could see Kendra standing in the shadows of the landing. She was wearing her robe, holding her stomach. Her eyes were wide with terror. She knew what was happening. She knew I was being blackmailed. I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I looked back at Gavin. I let my shoulders slump in defeat. "I built this company from nothing," I said softly. "I laid every brick. I poured every foundation. And now you are too old to maintain it," Jasmine said, cold as ice. "Let it go, Dad. Sign the papers." I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I hesitated. "I do not trust this lawyer," I said, pointing at Mr. Blackwood. "He looks like a crook." Gavin rolled his eyes. "He is a respected attorney, Dad. Just sign." "No," I said, showing a flash of my old stubbornness. "I won't sign his papers. If I am going to give you my life's work, I am going to do it on my terms. My lawyer Stone sent over a transfer agreement yesterday. He said it was standard. He said it protects me more than this garbage." I pulled a blue folder from inside my jacket. It was the document Stone and I had drafted. The Reversible Living Trust. The poison pill. Gavin snatched the folder from my hand. He opened it and scanned the pages quickly. He was looking for numbers. He was looking for the words, total control and full assets. He found them. Stone had put them right at the top in bold letters. This looks fine," Gavin said, flipping through the pages. "It actually gives me broader powers than Blackwood's draft. It includes the offshore accounts and the shell companies." He did not read the definitions. He did not read Clause 4B. He did not see that by accepting the assets, he was also accepting personal liability for the toxic Vegas debts. He was too greedy. He saw the word billions and stopped reading. "Fine," Gavin said, tossing the folder onto the table. "If it makes you happy, we will use your form. Just sign the damn thing." He uncapped a heavy, expensive fountain pen and shoved it into my hand. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Counting down the seconds of his life, not mine. I leaned over the document. The letters swam before my eyes. I was not acting now. The stress was real. I was about to sign away my empire. Even though I knew it was a trap, it still felt like cutting off my own arm. I felt the tip of the pen touch the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. Alonzo. I wrote slowly, the letters jagged and shaky. Hayes. I lifted the pen. It was done. Gavin snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. He stared at my signature like it was a winning lottery ticket. A slow, victorious smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has just become a king. "Thank you, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with triumph. "You made the right choice." He turned to Mr. Blackwood. "File this immediately. Electronic submission. I want access to the accounts by tomorrow morning." Mr. Blackwood nodded and started scanning the pages with a portable scanner. I watched as the machine ate the document page by page. It was eating Gavin's future, and he didn't even know it. Dr. Evans closed her clipboard. "Since Mr. Hayes has cooperated voluntarily, I suppose the commitment order is not necessary today, but I will keep it on file, just in case." She stood up and walked out without a backward glance. She was just a hired gun leaving the scene of the crime. Jasmine walked over and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were cold. "We are going to take good care of you, Dad," she said. "Now why don't you go upstairs and rest? You look exhausted." She meant, "Why don't you go upstairs and die?" I stood up, leaning heavily on the arm of the chair. I looked at Gavin one last time. He was already on his phone texting someone. Probably Sal the loan shark. Probably telling him the money was coming. "You are right," I said. "I am tired. It is a heavy burden running a family. I am glad it is your problem now, Gavin." He didn't even look up. Yeah, go sleep it off, old man." I walked toward the stairs. My legs felt lighter with every step. I passed Kendra on the landing. I did not stop. I did not speak. But as I passed her, I winked. A quick, sharp wink. Her mouth fell open slightly. She understood. The game was not over. The game had just entered the final quarter. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. I saw Dr. Evans and Mr. Blackwood driving away. I saw Gavin walking out to his Porsche, laughing into his phone. He was celebrating. "Laugh while you can, son," I whispered. I went to my desk and pulled out the burner phone. I sent a text to Stone. "The Eagle has landed." He signed, "Execute the trap." I sat down on the edge of my bed. I looked at the empty spot where Duke used to sleep. A wave of grief hit me, but I pushed it down. Not yet. I could not mourn yet. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow the banks would open. Tomorrow Gavin would try to transfer $5 million to a criminal organization. And tomorrow he would find out that the bank accounts were frozen not by me, but by the federal government, because the new trustee had just assumed liability for a federal crime. I lay back on the pillows and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. I slept like a baby. I slept like a man who had just handed his enemy a live grenade and pulled the pin. The scream that tore through the silent hallway of the Hayes estate on Monday morning was not human. It was the raw, animalistic sound of a soul being ripped apart. I was in the kitchen forcing down a piece of dry toast when I heard it. My heart stopped. It was Kendra. I dropped the toast and ran. I forgot to limp. I forgot to shuffle. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my old legs remembering the strength that used to carry bags of cement up scaffolding. I burst into the master bedroom, and the scene I found froze the blood in my veins. Kendra was on the floor, clutching her stomach. Her face was a mask of sheer terror and sweat. A dark stain was spreading rapidly across the expensive beige carpet beneath her. She was 7 months pregnant. It was too soon. Far too soon. Alonzo. She gasped, reaching out a trembling hand toward me. "The baby. Something is wrong." I fell to my knees beside her. Her skin was cold and clammy. Her pulse was racing like a trapped bird. This was it. The cumulative effect of the poison, or perhaps the stress of the last few days, had triggered a premature separation. "We need to go." I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my throat. We need the hospital now. Gavin appeared in the doorway. He was dressed in his tennis whites holding a racket. He looked down at Kendra bleeding on the floor, and for a split second I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated joy in his eyes. He did not see a tragedy. He saw a solution. He saw $50 million staying in his pocket. "Oh my God," Gavin said, his voice devoid of any real urgency. "Is she okay?" "Get the car," I roared. "Get the Porsche. It is the fastest. Drive us to the clinic." Gavin did not move. He patted his pockets slowly. He looked around the room with exaggerated confusion. "The keys," he muttered. "Shoot. I think I left them in the study downstairs. Or maybe they are in my gym bag. Hang on, let me go look." He turned and walked away. He walked. He did not run. He strolled out of the room as if he was looking for a misplaced television remote, not the means to save 2 lives. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was stalling. Every minute wasted was another drop of blood lost. Every second of delay decreased the oxygen going to my son's brain. He wanted Kendra to bleed out. He wanted the baby to be born silent. He was murdering them with inaction. Kendra gripped my hand so hard her nails dug into my skin. "Alonzo, please. It hurts." I looked at the door where Gavin had disappeared. I listened to him opening drawers downstairs, slowly. Clink, clank. "I cannot find them, Dad." He called up the stairs, his voice casual. "Give me a minute." That was the moment Alonzo, the frail old man, died. That was the moment the actor left the stage. I stood up. I looked at my reflection in the vanity mirror. I did not see a victim. I saw a father. I saw a husband. I saw a builder who knew that when a wall is in the way, you do not ask it to move. You smash it down. I bent down and scooped Kendra up into my arms. She was heavy, but my adrenaline turned her weight into nothing. I carried her out of the room and down the stairs. I did not hold the banister. My steps were heavy and sure. I reached the bottom of the stairs just as Gavin wandered out of the study empty-handed. "Still looking, Dad," he said, shrugging. "Maybe we should call an ambulance. It might take 20 minutes, but..." He stopped talking when he saw me. He saw me standing tall, holding my wife. He saw the look in my eyes. It was not the cloudy gaze of a confused senior. It was the burning stare of an executioner. "Get out of my way," I growled. The sound came from deep in my chest, a guttural command that made him take a step back involuntarily. "Where are you going?" Gavin stammered. "You cannot drive. You are sick." I walked past him, ignoring him completely. I headed straight for the living room display cabinet. Inside that glass case, sitting on a velvet pillow, was the set of keys to my first truck, a 1978 Ford F-150. Rusty, reliable, and built like a tank. It was the truck I started my company with. Gavin called it a piece of junk and made me keep it parked behind the garage covered in a tarp. He put the keys in a display case as a joke, a relic of my blue-collar past. I did not look for the key to the cabinet. I made a fist. I drew my arm back. Smash! My fist went through the glass. Shards flew everywhere, glittering like diamonds in the morning light. I felt the skin on my knuckles split. I felt the warm trickle of my own blood, but I did not feel pain. I felt power. I grabbed the rusty keys. "Dad, what are you doing?" Gavin screamed, realizing his plan was falling apart. "You are crazy. You cannot take the truck." I turned to him, holding the keys tight in my bloody hand. "Watch me." I carried Kendra out the back door into the rain that had started to fall again. I laid her gently across the bench seat of the old truck. It smelled of old oil and hard work, the smell of safety. I climbed into the driver's seat. I shoved the key into the ignition. It stuck for a second. "Come on, old girl," I whispered. "One last job." I turned the key. The engine roared to life with a thunderous cough, belching black smoke. It was the sound of an angry beast waking from a long slumber. I slammed it into gear and tore out from behind the garage. Mud flew from the tires. I saw Gavin running out the front door. He was holding a remote control, the main gate remote. He pointed it at the massive wrought iron gates at the end of the driveway. The gates began to close. He was locking us in. He was trying to trap us on the property. I looked at the closing gap. It was getting smaller by the second. I looked at Gavin standing on the porch, a smug smile returning to his face. He thought the old truck would stop. He thought I would be afraid to scratch the paint. I floored the accelerator. The truck surged forward. The engine screamed. I gripped the steering wheel with my bloody hands. I did not aim for the gap. I aimed for the center of the gate. "Hold on, Kendra," I shouted. Gavin's smile vanished. He dropped the remote. The truck hit the iron gates at 50 miles per hour. Crash! The sound was deafening. Metal screeched against metal. The heavy iron gates which I had welded myself 30 years ago were ripped off their hinges. They flew open like paper wings. The front grille of the truck crumpled, but the engine kept roaring. We smashed through the barrier, showering the driveway with sparks and twisted metal. We were free. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the son-in-law who was now jumping into his Porsche in a panic. I had one mission: get to the clinic. I drove like a madman. I ran every red light. I drove over medians. The old truck rattled and shook, but it held together. "Stay with me, Kendra," I kept yelling over the roar of the engine. "Stay with me, baby. We are almost there." She was groaning in pain, her breathing shallow. I reached over and held her hand, squeezing it in our signal. "Pulse, pulse, pulse. I am here. I am fighting." We skidded into the emergency bay of the private clinic 10 minutes later. The truck was smoking. The bumper was dragging on the ground. I kicked the door open and jumped out. "Help!" I screamed. "I need help here." Dr. Aris was already there, waiting by the sliding doors with a gurney. I had texted him the moment I got in the truck. He ran out with 2 nurses. They pulled Kendra from the truck. She was pale, almost translucent. "Her pressure is bottoming out," Aris shouted, checking the monitors. "We need to get her to the OR immediately. Move! Move!" They ran with the gurney, the wheels clattering on the pavement. I ran beside them, holding Kendra's hand until we reached the double doors of the surgery wing. "Wait here," Alonso Aris said, pushing me back. "You cannot come in. We will do everything we can." I stood there breathing hard, my chest heaving. My hand was covered in blood from the glass and from the steering wheel. I watched the doors swing shut, swallowing my wife and my unborn child. A screech of tires erupted behind me. Gavin's silver Porsche skidded to a halt in the ambulance bay. He jumped out, looking disheveled and frantic. He saw me standing by the doors. He ran toward me. "Dad," he panted, trying to look concerned. "Oh, thank God. Did they make it?" I stepped in front of the doors, blocking his path. I was covered in dust, blood, and rain. I looked like a demon rising from the earth. I looked at Gavin. I did not speak. I just stared at him with a cold, absolute hatred. He tried to step around me. "I need to see her, Dad. I need to make sure." I placed my hand on his chest. It was a heavy shove. He stumbled back. "You go nowhere," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "But I am family," he protested. "You are nothing," I spat. At that moment, the surgical light above the door turned red. The operation had begun. Gavin looked at the light, then back at me. He knew he had failed to stop us. Now he was praying for the surgeon to fail. I stood guard in front of those doors. I was not moving. I was the final line of defense. And if he tried to cross me again, I would not need a golf club or a truck. I would tear him apart with my bare hands. The race was over. Now the real battle for life began. The waiting room outside the surgical wing was a purgatory of white walls and the smell of antiseptic. The clock on the wall hummed with a mechanical indifference that made me want to rip it down. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my clothes still stained with the blood from my knuckles and the grime from the truck. I looked like a man who had walked out of a war zone, and in many ways I had. Gavin was pacing back and forth in front of the vending machine. The fluorescent lights reflected off his sweaty forehead. He kept checking his watch. He was not checking it because he was worried about the mother of his child. He was checking it because every minute that passed was a minute closer to his deadline with the loan sharks. He needed a death certificate. He needed it today. I sat still. My hands were clasped between my knees. I was praying. I had not prayed in 30 years, not since my mother passed. But today I prayed to every god I could name. I asked for strength. I asked for a miracle. And I asked for vengeance. The double doors swung open. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Gavin froze mid-step. I stood up, my knees popping. Dr. Aris walked out. He was still wearing his blue surgical scrubs. His mask hung around his neck. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and sweat matted his hair to his forehead. But then he did something that stopped my heart. He smiled. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice soft but clear. "You can breathe now." Gavin rushed forward, pushing past me. Is it over?" he asked. Aris looked at Gavin with a cold professional disdain before turning his eyes back to me. The surgery was complicated. The uterine wall was paper thin, just as we feared. But Kendra is a fighter, Alonso. She is stable. She is resting in recovery. Gavin's face fell. It was a mask of pure disappointment. "Oh," he said, his voice flat. That is good news. And the baby. I assumed the trauma was too much for the fetus." Aris paused. He looked at me and I saw a twinkle in his eye. A secret we had shared since that first ultrasound. A secret he had kept even from me until the very end. Actually, Aris said, his voice raising a little so the nurses at the station could hear. There was a surprise. It seems the ultrasound equipment at your previous clinic was not just calibrating depth poorly, it missed something entirely. What are you talking about? Gavin snapped, losing his patience. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes, Aris said, extending his hand to me. You are the father of 2 healthy baby boys. Twins. The word hit the room like a physical blow. Twins. I stood there stunned. I remembered the scan. I remembered the 2 faint pulses I thought I heard, but Aris had quickly turned off the sound. He had known. He had known that if Gavin found out there were 2 heirs, the danger would have doubled, so he hid one. He protected them in the shadow of his silence. 2 boys. I whispered, tears filling my eyes. 2 sons. Gavin stumbled back as if he had been slapped. He collapsed onto one of the waiting room chairs. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I could see the gears turning in his head. I could see the math happening in real time behind his terrified eyes. He knew the will. He knew the trust fund I had signed just yesterday. The clause was specific. It stated that if a male heir was born, 70% of the liquid assets and controlling interest in the company would immediately transfer to the trust for the child's benefit. But the clause also had a provision for multiple heirs. In the event of multiple male heirs, the estate would be divided equally among them to ensure their future. 30% for the first son, 30% for the second son. That was 60% of the entire empire locked away in irrevocable trusts. And the remaining 40%, that was barely enough to cover the operating costs and the massive federal fines from the Vegas project that Gavin had just unknowingly accepted liability for. He was not just broke. He was underwater. He was drowning. Twins. Gavin whispered, his voice shaking. That is impossible. The scan only showed 1. Nature is full of surprises, Aris said dryly. They are small, only 4 pounds each, but they are breathing on their own. They are fighters just like their father. I looked at Gavin. He looked like he was going to vomit. The blood had drained from his face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. He was doing the calculations over and over again, hoping for a different result, but the math was brutal and unforgiving. 60% of the money was gone. The rest was tied up in debt. He had 0. He had less than 0. He had a $5 million debt to a loan shark named Sal who promised to kill him by Monday. And it was Monday noon. I walked over to Gavin. I stood over him, casting a long shadow. I put my hand on his shoulder. I felt him flinch. Did you hear that, son? I said, my voice dripping with false joy. 2 boys. That means the family name is safe. Double the legacy. Gavin looked up at me. His eyes were wild. He looked like a trapped rat. Yeah, he croaked. Double. That is... great. He stood up abruptly, shaking my hand off. I need to use the restroom. My stomach. It must be the stress. He did not wait for an answer. He turned and ran down the hallway toward the public restrooms. He moved with a desperate, frantic energy. He was not sick. He was terrified. He realized that his plan to let nature take its course had failed. He realized that his plan to use the power of attorney had backfired. He had no moves left on the chessboard, except one, the nuclear option. I watched him disappear around the corner. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was going to make a call. He was going to call the only people who could fix a problem this big. He was going to call the people he owed money to. He was going to offer them a trade. My life and the lives of my sons in exchange for his debt. I turned to Dr. Aris. The smile vanished from my face. Lock it down, I said quietly. Aris nodded. He understood. He had seen this kind of evil before. I have security on the floor, Aris said. But they are just hospital guards, Alonzo. They carry tasers, not guns. That will not be enough, I said. Gavin is desperate. He is going to call in professional killers. I need to make a call too. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now. The joy of my son's birth gave me a new kind of strength. I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for 2 tiny lives that had just entered this world. I walked to the window of the waiting room. I could see the parking lot below. I saw Gavin's Porsche. I saw the dark clouds gathering over the city. I dialed the number for the head of my old construction security team, a man named Brutus. He was a former Marine who ran my sites with an iron fist. He had retired when I did, but he still owed me a favor. "Brutus," I said when he answered. "It is Alonzo. I need the crew, all of them." There was a pause, then the gruff voice I remembered so well. "Is it a job, boss?" "It is a war," I said. "Bring the hardware. I am at the West Side Clinic, 3rd floor. I have a wolf in the building and he is calling the pack. I need you to seal this place up tight. Nobody gets in. Nobody gets out." "Consider it done," Brutus said. 10 minutes. I hung up. I looked down the hallway toward the restroom where Gavin was hiding. I could imagine him in there huddled in a stall, whispering into his phone, begging for a hitman to come and slaughter his own family. It made me sick. It made me want to go in there and finish him myself. But I could not leave the door to the recovery room unguarded. I walked back to the double doors. I stood there with my arms crossed. I was an old man with bad knees and a heart condition. But right now I felt like a fortress. Inside that room were my wife and my sons. Outside was a storm of violence headed our way. "Let them come," I whispered. I checked the fire extinguisher on the wall. It was heavy. Good. I checked the lock on the door. It was sturdy. Good. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Gavin walked back into the waiting room. He had washed his face. His hair was slicked back. He looked calmer. Too calm. It was the calm of a man who had just signed a contract with the devil. "Feeling better?" I asked. "Much better, Dad," Gavin said, sitting down across from me. "I just made some calls to spread the good news." "I bet you did," I said. He smiled. It was a cold reptile smile. "You should rest, Dad," he said. "It is going to be a long night." He had no idea how long. He thought he had summoned the cavalry. He did not know that I had summoned the army. The twins were safe for now, but the sun was setting and the darkness was bringing monsters with it. I planted my feet firmly on the floor. I was ready. The silent pulse was about to become a deafening roar. The storm outside battered the clinic windows with a fury that matched the turmoil inside my chest. The hospital hallway was dim lit only by the low setting of the fluorescent strips and the red glow of the exit signs. I stood guard by the double doors of the recovery wing, my arms crossed over my chest. I was tired. My bones ached with a deep throbbing rhythm and my hand was still wrapped in a makeshift bandage from where I had punched the display case. But I was not moving. I was the gatekeeper. 10 minutes after I made the call, the elevator doors slid open at the far end of the corridor. Out stepped Brutus. He was 70 years old, but he looked like a vending machine made of concrete. He was wearing a trench coat that could not hide the bulk of his shoulders. Behind him were 3 other men. I knew them all. Tiny, who used to operate the crane and had hands the size of shovels. Miller, who ran the welding crew and had a scar running down his face from a hot rivet. And Johnson, the silent foreman who never smiled. These were not private security contractors in fancy uniforms. These were men who built skyscrapers. They were men who knew how to handle steel and concrete and trouble. Brutus nodded at me. He did not ask questions. He saw the blood on my shirt and the look in my eyes, and he knew exactly what time it was. It was overtime. We secured the perimeter. Brutus said, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "Johnson is on the stairs. Tiny is by the elevator. Miller is watching the fire escape. Nobody gets in unless they are wearing a halo." I shook his hand. It felt like gripping a piece of rebar. "Thank you, old friend," I said. He just grunted. "You pay for the beer when this is over." We settled into the silence. It was a heavy waiting silence. I watched the nurses stationed down the hall. The night nurse was asleep in her chair, her head lolling back. The clinic was operating on a skeleton crew due to the storm. It was the perfect hunting ground for a predator. Midnight came and went. The rain lashed against the glass. Then I saw him. He came off the service elevator, the one used for laundry and medical waste. He was dressed in blue scrubs, wearing a surgical mask and a hairnet. He was pushing a cart full of linens. To anyone else, he looked like an orderly doing his rounds. But I spent 40 years watching men work. I know the walk of a man who is working for a paycheck, and I know the walk of a man who is on a mission. This man walked too smoothly. His steps made no sound on the linoleum. He did not look at the charts on the wall. He did not look at the sleeping nurse. His eyes were fixed on the double doors behind me, the doors to the NICU where my sons were sleeping. I nudged Brutus. Brutus looked up from his newspaper. He saw the orderly. He stood up slowly, blocking the width of the hallway. The orderly kept coming. He kept his head down, pushing the cart. "Hey," Brutus called out. "Wrong floor, buddy. Laundry is in the basement." The orderly stopped. He was 10 feet away. He looked up. His eyes were cold and dead. They were the eyes of a shark. He did not speak. He reached under the pile of sheets in his cart. He did not pull out a gun. A gun is too loud. He pulled out a syringe. It was large and filled with a clear liquid, likely a sedative or a paralytic, something to make the guards sleep while he smothered the babies. I stepped forward. I felt a surge of rage so powerful it almost blinded me. He was bringing poison into a hospital. "Go home," I said, my voice low. "Turn around and walk away and you might live to see sunrise." The assassin dropped the pretense. He moved with a terrifying speed. He lunged at Brutus, the syringe held like a dagger. Brutus was fast for a big man, but the assassin was younger. The needle slashed through Brutus's coat, tearing the fabric. Brutus roared and swung a fist that would have knocked a mule unconscious. The assassin ducked, weaving under the blow with unnatural grace. He kicked Brutus in the knee, a precise tactical strike meant to shatter the joint. Brutus grunted and went down to one knee. The assassin spun around, aiming the needle at Brutus's neck. "No," I screamed. I did not have a weapon. I was an old man in a suit, but I was standing next to a crash cart. I saw an oxygen tank strapped to the side. It was a portable steel cylinder about 2 feet long. I grabbed the tank. It was heavy. It weighed about 15 pounds. To a young man, that is nothing. To me, it felt like a mountain. But I remembered the days on the site. I remembered swinging sledgehammers for 10 hours a day. I remembered the rhythm, lift, swing, impact. I did not hesitate. I stepped into the fray. The assassin saw me coming. He sneered, thinking I was just a frail nuisance. He turned to backhand me, to swipe me away like a fly. He made the mistake of judging the book by its cover. I gripped the neck of the oxygen tank with both hands. I channeled every ounce of frustration, every ounce of fear, every ounce of love for my wife and children into my arms. I pivoted on my hips just like I did on the golf course, but this time I did not hold back. I swung the steel tank in a wide arc. It connected with the assassin's outstretched arm. Crack! The sound of bone breaking echoed through the hallway, loud and wet. The assassin screamed, dropping the syringe. He stumbled back, clutching his shattered arm. He looked at me with shock. He could not believe that the old man in the cardigan had just broken his ulna. But I was not done. I did not stop. Brutus was struggling to get up, his knee injured. The assassin was wounded, but still dangerous. He reached into his waistband with his good hand, pulling out a knife, a jagged combat knife. He lunged at me. I did not retreat. I stepped into his guard. I used the oxygen tank like a shield, blocking the knife thrust. Sparks flew as the blade scraped against the steel cylinder. "I am not just a father," I roared, pushing him back. "I am a builder, and I bury trash like you under the foundation." I swung the tank again. This time I aimed low. I swung it like a pendulum, targeting his ribs. The steel cylinder slammed into his side. I felt the impact vibrate up my arms. I heard the air leave his lungs in a wet wheeze. He doubled over, gasping for breath. Brutus was up now. He grabbed the assassin by the back of his scrubs and slammed him into the wall. The wall shook. A picture of a smiling baby fell to the floor and shattered. "Stay down," Brutus growled, pressing his massive forearm against the assassin's throat. The assassin struggled, kicking and thrashing. He was strong, wiry, and desperate. He managed to get a leg free and kicked me in the stomach. I fell back, hitting the floor hard. The wind was knocked out of me. My vision swam. I saw spots of light dancing in the darkness. My chest burned. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm that felt like it might explode. But I saw the assassin reaching for the knife he had dropped. His hand was inches from the handle. I could not let him get it. If he got the knife, he would kill Brutus. He would kill me. He would kill my sons. I crawled. I crawled on my hands and knees, ignoring the pain in my ribs. I grabbed the oxygen tank again. I dragged it across the floor. I reached the assassin just as his fingers touched the knife handle. I lifted the tank one last time. I did not have the strength to swing it, so I just let gravity do the work. I dropped the heavy steel bottom of the tank onto his hand. He screamed again, a high-pitched sound of agony. Brutus capitalized on the moment. He landed a solid right hook to the assassin's jaw. The assassin's head snapped back. His eyes rolled up into his head. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. Silence returned to the hallway. The only sound was the heavy breathing of two old men. Brutus leaned against the wall, clutching his knee. "You okay, boss?" he wheezed. I sat on the floor, leaning against the crash cart. I wiped sweat and blood from my forehead. "I am alive," I said. "That is enough." I looked at the assassin. He was young, maybe 30. He had a handsome face now marred by violence. He was just a tool, a weapon bought and paid for. "Check his pockets," I said. Brutus limped over and patted down the unconscious man. He pulled out a wallet, a set of car keys, and a smartphone. The screen was cracked from the fight. Brutus handed me the phone. It was locked. "Use his finger," I said, pointing to the hand I had crushed. Brutus grabbed the assassin's limp hand and pressed his thumb against the sensor. The phone unlocked. I opened the Messages app. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now, the adrenaline fading, leaving only shock. The top message thread was labeled simply "Client." I opened it. The most recent message was sent 10 minutes ago. It read, "The old man is at the door. Do not hesitate. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Double fee if you burn the recovery room. No witnesses. Burn the recovery room. He wanted to burn my wife and children alive." I scrolled up. There was a photo sent by the client. It was a photo of me taken from across the street, and below it a photo of the clinic floor plan. I pressed the call button on the client contact. I held the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice. Then I heard a voice I knew better than my own. A voice I had welcomed into my home. "Is it done?" Gavin whispered. His voice was trembling with hope. "Is he dead?" I did not speak for a long moment. I let him hear my breathing. I let him hear the silence of his failure. "Hello, Gavin," I said, my voice raspy and cold. There was a strangled sound on the other end, like a man choking on a bone. "Dad," Gavin squeaked. "No," I said, "not Dad. You lost the right to use that word when you ordered a fire in a nursery." "Dad, wait. I can explain. It is not what you think. I am looking at the man you sent," I said, looking down at the broken assassin. "He is sleeping right now, but the police are coming, and this phone is going into an evidence bag." "Please," Gavin sobbed. "Please, Dad. Sal is going to kill me. You have to help me." I looked at the message again. "Burn the recovery room. You made your bed, son," I said. "Now you die in it." I hung up the phone. I looked at Brutus. He was smiling a bloody, grim smile. "Nice swing, boss," Brutus said, nodding at the oxygen tank. I stood up, using the tank as a crutch. I felt old. I felt broken. But I also felt lighter than I had in years. The threat was neutralized. The evidence was secured. "Tie him up," I said, "and call the police. Tell them to bring a lot of handcuffs." I walked back to the double doors of the recovery wing. I looked through the small glass window. Inside, I could see a nurse checking the monitors. Everything was peaceful. My family was safe. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor right in front of the door. I placed the oxygen tank across my lap like a sword. I would not move until the police arrived. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain. It sounded like applause. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom at the Palmer House Hilton shimmered with a light that felt too bright for my tired eyes. It had been 1 week since the night of the lockdown at the clinic. 1 week since I swung an oxygen tank like a sledgehammer and broke the arm of a man sent to murder my children. The police had cleaned up the mess quietly. I had asked for a delay in the public arrest. I told the detective that I needed a few days to secure the company assets and ensure the safety of my employees before the scandal broke. But that was not the whole truth. The truth was that I wanted to choose the venue for Gavin's execution. A jail cell was too private. A courtroom was too sterile. I wanted to do it here in front of the 500 most powerful people in Chicago. I wanted to do it at the annual Hayes Foundation Gala. I stood in the shadows of the mezzanine looking down at the crowd. The room was filled with tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck. Down there, circulating among the senators and the CEOs, were Gavin and Jasmine. They looked impeccable. Gavin was wearing a custom Armani suit that fit him perfectly. Jasmine was dripping in diamonds that belonged to her mother. They were smiling, shaking hands, and playing the part of the devoted successors. They thought I was still in the hospital recovering from the stress of the birth. They thought the assassin had kept his mouth shut. They thought they had one last chance to seize the narrative before the walls closed in. They were wrong. I adjusted the cuffs of my tuxedo. It felt a little loose. I had lost weight in the last month. The thallium was out of my system, but the toll it took on my body was real. My hands, however, were steady. I walked to the edge of the balcony and signaled to Brutus, who was standing by the sound booth. He nodded. The stage was set. Down below, the music faded. A spotlight hit the center stage. Gavin walked up to the microphone. He looked confident. He looked like a man who owned the room. He did not know that he was standing on a trapdoor and I was holding the lever. Good evening, everyone, Gavin said, his voice smooth and charming. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate the legacy of Hayes Construction. As many of you know, my father-in-law, Alonzo Hayes, could not be here tonight. His health has been fragile lately. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Jasmine dabbed at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. It was a masterful performance. It breaks my heart to see such a titan of industry struggle with his mind. Gavin continued, his voice dropping to a somber register. But we as a family are stepping up. Jasmine and I are ready to carry the torch. We are ready to guide this company into a new era, an era of innovation and bold investments. He was talking about selling off the assets to pay his gambling debts. He was talking about gutting the pension fund. Tonight, Gavin said, raising his glass, I am asking you to trust us, to stand with us as we make the difficult transition of power to the future of Hayes Construction. The crowd raised their glasses. To the future, they echoed. That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked down the grand staircase. I did not use a cane. I did not hold the railing. I walked with the heavy, deliberate steps of a man who has carried steel beams on his shoulders. The people near the stairs noticed me first. They gasped. They nudged their neighbors. The ripple of silence spread through the room faster than the champagne. Gavin heard the silence. He looked up. When he saw me descending the stairs, the color drained from his face so fast it looked like a curtain falling. He lowered his glass. His hand was trembling. Dad, he stammered into the microphone. We didn't expect you. I did not stop until I reached the stage. I walked right up to him. I was 3 inches shorter than him, but in that moment I towered over him. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He gave it up without a fight. He was paralyzed by the ghost he thought he had buried. Good evening, I said. My voice was raspy, but it boomed through the speakers. I apologize for being late. I had some trash to take out. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw bankers I had worked with for decades. I saw city council members. I saw competitors. My son-in-law talks about legacy, I said, pacing the stage. He talks about the future, but you cannot build a future on a rotten foundation, and you certainly cannot build a legacy on lies. Alonzo. Please, Jasmine hissed from the side of the stage. Don't do this. You are confused. I turned to her. I am not confused, daughter. I have never been more clear. I looked up at the projection booth. Now Brutus. The massive screen behind me, which displayed the Hayes Construction logo, flickered. The image changed. It was not a slideshow of buildings. It was a grainy black and white video. The crowd gasped. It was the video from the camera I had hidden in the kitchen weeks ago. It showed Gavin standing at the counter. He was holding the bottle of prenatal vitamins. The timestamp in the corner showed 3 a.m. On the massive screen, 40 feet wide, everyone saw Gavin open the capsules. They saw him pouring a white powder from a plastic bag into the medicine. They saw him mixing it. What is this? Someone in the front row whispered. The video changed. Now it was the garage. The audio was crystal clear. The old man is still kicking. The natural causes route is taking too long. Gavin's voice boomed through the ballroom. It was the conversation with Sal the loan shark. I get it, Sal. A life for a debt. I understand. The room went deadly silent. 500 people held their breath. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Gavin stood center stage, frozen. He looked like a deer in the headlights of a semi-truck. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the crowd. There was nowhere to run. That is not real, he screamed, his voice cracking. That is a deep fake. He made it up. He is senile. I pointed at the screen. The video changed one last time. This was new footage. Footage from yesterday. It was the assassin sitting in a police interrogation room. His arm was in a cast. He was handcuffed to the table. Who hired you? The detective asked in the video. The assassin looked at the camera. His face was bruised. Gavin Miller, he said. He paid me $20,000 up front. 50 more when the job was done. And what was the job? The detective asked. Burn the recovery room, the assassin said. Kill the old man, kill the babies, make it look like an accident. The crowd erupted. It was not polite applause. It was a roar of shock and disgust. People were standing up. Chairs were knocked over. I turned to Gavin. He was shaking his head back and forth violently like a child trying to deny a broken window. No, 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 he whimpered. That is a lie. I stepped closer to him. The microphone picked up my whisper. It is over, Gavin. The poison, the accident on the cliffs, the hit man. I have it all. Gavin looked at Jasmine. He reached out for her. "Baby, tell them. Tell them it is a lie." Jasmine backed away from him. Her face was pale. She looked at the crowd. She saw the disgust in their eyes. She saw her social standing evaporating in seconds. She saw the prison sentence looming. "I didn't know," she screamed shrilly. "I didn't know he was doing this." "Dad, I swear." She was lying. I knew she was lying. But watching her throw him under the bus to save herself was a special kind of justice. Gavin looked at his wife, the woman he had conspired with, and saw nothing but betrayal. He unraveled. He collapsed. Not metaphorically. He physically collapsed. His knees gave way, and he fell onto the stage. He curled into a ball, covering his face with his hands. He began to sob. It was a pathetic, ugly sound, amplified by the speakers, for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the crowd one last time. "The Hayes Foundation has always stood for integrity. Tonight we are cleaning house." I signaled to the side of the stage. The doors opened. 4 uniformed police officers walked in. They marched up the stairs to the stage. They did not look like they were attending a gala. They looked like they were taking out the garbage. They pulled Gavin to his feet. He was limp. He could not even stand. They dragged him away, his expensive shoes dragging across the floor, his tuxedo bunched up. "Dad, please," he wailed as they hauled him off. "I am sorry. I will pay it back." The officers stopped in front of Jasmine. She froze. "Mrs. Miller," one of the officers said, "we have a warrant for your arrest as an accomplice to attempted murder and fraud." Jasmine's eyes rolled back in her head. She let out a small, soft sigh and crumpled to the floor in a dead faint. It might have been real or it might have been acting. I did not care. The officers picked her up and carried her out behind her husband. The ballroom was chaotic. People were shouting, taking photos, calling their lawyers. I stood alone on the stage. The screen behind me went black. The show was over. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at the empty spot where my family used to be. I felt a heavy weight lift off my chest. The cancer had been cut out. The rot was gone. I looked up at the balcony where Brutus was standing. He gave me a thumbs up. I walked off the stage. I did not stop to talk to the senators or the bankers. I did not stop to give interviews to the press. I walked straight out the back door into the cool night air. My car was waiting. I got in. "Take me to the hospital," I told the driver. "I have 2 sons waiting for a bedtime story." As the car pulled away, I looked back at the hotel. The lights were still shining, but the party was over. The reveal was complete. Now all that was left was the rebuilding. And that was what I did best. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 500 people stood frozen in their tracks, their champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. The only sound was the hum of the microphone and the ragged breathing of the man lying broken on the stage floor. Gavin looked up at me with eyes red from weeping. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the belt. But I was not his father, and I was not there to discipline him. I was there to end him. I gripped the microphone stand with my good hand. My knuckles were white. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the shock. I saw the disgust. But mostly I saw the realization dawning on them that they were witnessing something biblical. They were watching a man reap exactly what he had sown. "You all saw the video," I said, my voice booming through the speakers, filling every corner of the room. "You saw the poison. You heard the hitman. But there is one thing you did not see." I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the document I had signed on Sunday. The transfer of power. The paper that Gavin thought was his golden ticket to my fortune. My son-in-law thought he was clever. I continued walking slowly around his prostrate form like a lion circling its prey. He thought he forced my hand. He thought he bullied a senile old man into signing away his life rights. He thought this signature gave him control over my bank accounts, my properties, and my medical decisions. I unfolded the paper and held it up to the light. But Gavin forgot the first rule of construction. Always check the foundation before you build. You see, on Saturday night, after I found out about the poison, I did not just call my security team. I called the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A gasp rippled through the room. Gavin's head snapped up. His mouth fell open. "That is right," I said, looking down at him. Agent Miller and his team have been monitoring this situation for 72 hours. This document I signed on Sunday was not a transfer of power. It was a marked document. It was part of a federal sting operation known as a controlled delivery. I tossed the paper onto the stage next to Gavin. It fluttered down, landing softly beside his trembling hand. When I signed that paper, I was not giving you my money, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I was giving the FBI permission to track every single move you made as the new trustee, every dollar you tried to move, every email you sent, and most importantly, every call you made to your loan shark friends. I turned back to the crowd. He thought he was rushing to pay a gambling debt, I said, pointing at Gavin. But the moment he tried to transfer funds from the Hayes Trust to a known criminal enterprise, he committed wire fraud. He committed money laundering. And because he signed Clause 4B of the trust, accepting personal liability, he tied his own name to those crimes forever. Gavin tried to push himself up. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "You set me up," he choked out. "You trapped me. I did not trap you, son," I said, cold as ice. "I just gave you enough rope. You are the one who tied the noose. You are the one who decided that my life and the lives of my unborn sons were worth less than your gambling debts. You played the game of kings with a pawn's mind, and now you have been checked." I signaled to the wings of the stage. Special Agent Miller walked out. He was a tall man with a face like carved granite. He was followed by 4 more officers wearing tactical vests. They did not look like the polite hotel security. They looked like the heavy hand of the law. Agent Miller stepped up to the microphone. He did not ask for permission. He took charge. "Gavin Miller, please stand up," he commanded. Gavin tried to crawl away. Crawl. He actually tried to crawl backward on the stage, dragging his expensive suit across the floor like a wounded animal. 2 officers stepped forward and hoisted him up by his armpits. His legs were useless jelly. "Gavin Miller, you are under arrest," Agent Miller announced, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "You are charged with 3 counts of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit capital murder, wire fraud in the 1st degree, elder abuse, aggravated assault, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to kill." The list of charges went on and on. It was a litany of sins. Each charge felt like a physical blow to Gavin. He sagged lower and lower in the officer's grip. Furthermore, Agent Miller continued reading from a warrant. "Your assets have been frozen. The Porsche outside has been seized. Your personal accounts have been drained to pay the restitution clause in the trust you signed. You are not just going to prison, Mr. Miller. You are going to prison penniless." Penniless. The words seemed to hurt Gavin more than the murder charges. He had spent his whole life chasing money, worshipping it, killing for it. And now in the blink of an eye, he had lost it all. He had lost the house. He had lost the cars. He had lost the status. He was nothing more than a number in the system. "No," Gavin wailed. "It is a mistake. I can fix this. Dad, please tell them. I can fix this." He looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. He looked for the father-in-law who had bailed him out so many times before. He looked for the man who had paid his debts, who had bought him cars, who had welcomed him into the family. But that man was gone. That man had died the moment he saw the thallium report. I walked over to him. The officers held him tight, but they let me approach. I stood inches from his face. I could smell the sweat of his fear. I could smell the expensive cologne that could not hide the stench of his betrayal. I leaned in close. I wanted this to be intimate. I wanted my words to be the last thing he heard before the cell door slammed shut. "You called me a vegetable," I whispered. "You told your friends I was a senile old man who was taking too long to die. You laughed about burying me." Gavin sobbed, shaking his head. "Look at me," I commanded. He forced his eyes to meet mine. "I am Alonzo Hayes," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I built this city. I have poured concrete that will last 100 years. I have weathered storms that would snap you in half. You thought you could tear down my house. You thought you could crumble my foundation." I reached out and patted his cheek. It was not a gentle pat. It was a hard, stinging tap, a gesture of total dominance. "You forgot one thing, boy," I hissed. "I am the one who poured the cement, and tonight I am burying you in it." I stepped back. "Get him out of my sight," I said to the officers. They began to drag him away. Gavin started screaming. He screamed for his lawyer. He screamed for mercy. He screamed my name. "Dad, Dad, I am sorry." I watched him go. I watched them drag him down the stairs, across the dance floor, past the horrified guests. He was kicking and screaming, losing his shoes, leaving a trail of humiliation in his wake. The ballroom doors swung open and then shut, swallowing him into the night. The silence returned. But this time, it was different. It was lighter. The air felt cleaner. The poison had been purged. I turned back to the microphone. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the people who had come to celebrate a legacy. "Thank you for coming," I said simply. "Please enjoy the dessert. The chocolate mousse is excellent." I placed the microphone back on the stand. I straightened my tuxedo jacket. I walked off the stage with my head held high. I walked past the tables where people were staring at me with awe. I did not stop. I did not smile. I just kept walking. I made my way to the exit. Brutus was waiting for me by the door. He opened it, and the cool night air hit my face. It smelled of rain and exhaust and freedom. "Did he cry?" Brutus asked. "Like a baby," I said. "Good." Brutus grunted. My car was waiting at the curb. I climbed into the back seat. I leaned my head back against the leather headrest. My body was exhausted. My hands were shaking again, not from act, but from the sheer release of tension. But I was smiling. "Take me to the hospital," I told the driver. "I have a wife to kiss and 2 sons to meet." The car pulled away into the Chicago night, leaving the hotel and the wreckage of Gavin's life in the rearview mirror. I watched the city lights blur past the buildings I had built, standing tall and proud against the sky. They were strong. They were enduring. And so was I. The payoff was complete. Justice had been served not with a gavel, but with a sledgehammer. And now the only thing left to build was a future for the 2 little boys waiting for me in the recovery room. A future where the name Hayes stood for strength, honor, and the unbreakable will of a father who refused to die. The morning after the gala, I went to the police precinct. I did not go to give a statement or to press charges because the FBI had already handled that. I went to say goodbye. Jasmine was sitting in a small interrogation room, handcuffed to a metal table. She looked nothing like the woman who had dripped in diamonds the night before. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks in black streaks, and her expensive gown was wrinkled and stained. When she saw me walk through the door, she tried to stand up, but the chain pulled her back down. Her eyes lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. "Daddy," she cried out, her voice cracking. "Oh, thank God you came. You have to tell them. You have to tell them I did not know anything. It was all Gavin. He is a monster, Daddy. He tricked me." I pulled out the metal chair opposite her and sat down slowly. I did not speak, I just looked at her. I looked for the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask for pony rides. I looked for the teenager I had taught to drive. I looked for the woman I had walked down the aisle, but I could not find them. All I could see was the person who held a camera phone steady while I screamed in pain. All I could see was the person who sat in my living room discussing my murder as if it were a renovation project. He made me do it. Jasmine sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. He said if I didn't help him, he would leave me. He said we would be poor. I was scared, Daddy. I was just a victim, too. I placed my hands on the cold metal table. My wedding ring clicked against the surface. "You were not a victim, Jasmine," I said, my voice low and steady. "You were an accomplice." "No," she shrieked, shaking her head violently. "I never touched the poison. I never called the hitman. I just wanted us to be a family again." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I set it on the table between us. "This is the footage from the kitchen," I said. "It captures audio perfectly. I heard you, Jasmine. I heard you ask Gavin if the poison would hurt. I heard you ask how long it would take for me to die. And I heard you say that you hoped it would be quick so you could book your vacation to the Maldives." She froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The lie died in her throat. "You did not do it for love," I continued. "You did it for money. You watched your husband mix rat poison into your father's drink, and you did not call the police. You did not warn me. You just checked the balance of your trust fund." She slumped in her chair, defeated. The mask of the innocent daughter fell away, revealing the cold, hard greed underneath. "So what happens now?" she whispered. "Are you going to let me rot in here?" I leaned back in my chair. I had spent the entire night thinking about this decision. Part of me, the part that was still a father, wanted to hire the best lawyers money could buy and get her a reduced sentence. But the part of me that was a builder knew that you cannot fix a house that is rotten to the core. You have to condemn it. I have spoken to the district attorney, I said. Because you cooperated with the arrest, and because you are my daughter, I have arranged a plea deal. You will serve 5 years in a minimum security facility for fraud and conspiracy. 5 years, she gasped. Daddy, that is forever. It is better than the 20 years Gavin is facing, I said. But there are conditions. What conditions? She asked, eyeing me warily. When you get out, you will not return to Chicago. You will not contact me. You will not contact Kendra. And you will never ever go near my sons. Her eyes narrowed. And the money. What about my inheritance? I almost laughed. Even now, facing prison, she was worried about the payout. There is no inheritance, I said. I dissolved your trust this morning. Every dime that was set aside for you has been transferred to the twins. She looked at me with pure hatred. You cannot do that. I am your daughter. I have rights. You have nothing, I said, standing up. But because I am not a monster, I have set up a small stipend for you. When you are released, you will receive $2,000 a month. It is enough to rent a small apartment and buy groceries. If you want more than that, you will have to do something you have never done in your life. You will have to get a job. $2,000, she screamed, slamming her fists on the table. That is nothing. That is an insult. I cannot live on that. Then starve, I said. I turned my back on her. Daddy, wait, she screamed. Daddy, please don't leave me here. I am sorry. I love you. I walked to the door and signaled the guard. I did not look back. I stepped out into the hallway and the heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off her screams. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It hurt more than the poison, but it was done. I had cut the dead weight loose. I left the precinct and got into my car. Drive me home, I told the driver. The drive back to the estate was quiet. The rain had stopped and the sun was trying to break through the clouds. When we pulled through the broken gates, the ones I had smashed with the truck, the house looked different. It did not look like my home anymore. It looked like a crime scene. It looked like a mausoleum of bad memories. I walked inside. The house was silent. Kendra and the twins were still at the hospital where they would stay for another week until the babies were strong enough to come home. I was alone in the cavernous foyer. I called the staff into the living room. The housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, the gardener, the chef. There were 6 of them in total. They stood in a line looking nervous. They had seen the news. They knew what had happened. Mrs. Higgins stepped forward, wringing her hands in her apron. Mr. Hayes, she said, we are so glad you are okay. We were so worried. I looked at her. Mrs. Higgins had been with me for 10 years. She was the one who cleaned the kitchen. She was the one who saw Gavin making his smoothies every morning. She was the one who saw Jasmine filming my outbursts. Did you know? I asked her. She blinked rapidly. Sir? Did you know he was poisoning me? I asked, my voice calm but sharp. Did you see the powder? Did you wonder why my health was failing so fast? She looked down at her shoes. I thought it was just medicine, sir. Mr. Gavin said it was vitamins. It was not my place to ask. Not your place, I repeated. I paid your salary. I paid for your husband's surgery last year. I treated you like family. And when you saw me dying, you decided it was not your place to speak up. I looked at the rest of them. The chef who let Gavin take over the kitchen. The gardener who saw me bury my dog and said nothing. They were not evil people, but they were cowards. And in my world, silence is just as dangerous as violence. You are all fired, I said. A gasp went down the line. Mr. Hayes, please, Mrs. Higgins cried. We need these jobs. You have 1 hour to pack your things, I said, checking my watch. Your final checks will be mailed to you. If you are not off the property in 60 minutes, I will have security remove you. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in shock. I walked through the house room by room. I walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinets. I pulled down the blender Gavin used. I threw it into the trash. I walked into the dining room where I had broken the vase. The shards were gone, swept away, but the memory remained. I walked up the stairs to the master bedroom. I stripped the sheets off the bed. I threw the pillows onto the floor. I could not sleep here. Not ever again. This house was built on secrets and lies. It was poisoned just as surely as I was. I went to my study and called my real estate agent. Alonzo, she said, sounding surprised. I heard about the trouble. Is there anything I can do? Sell it, I said. Sell what, Alonzo? The house, the estate, everything. I want it on the market today. But the market is soft right now, she warned. You won't get what it is worth. I do not care about the money, I said. Sell it cheap. Sell it fast. Sell it to a developer who will tear it down and build condos. I just want to be gone. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. I looked at the oak tree in the corner. That was the only thing leaving this place that would be hard. I went out to the garden shed and grabbed a shovel. I walked over to Duke's fresh grave. The earth was still loose. I could not leave him here. I could not leave him in the ground of a place that had killed him. I spent the next hour carefully exhuming my friend. I wrapped his small body in a clean linen sheet. I placed him in a wooden box I had built in my workshop years ago. It was heavy work, but it felt necessary. It was the final act of cleaning house. I carried the box to my car and placed it gently in the trunk. I would bury him at the new house, a house with no stairs, a house with big windows and a sunny garden where my sons could crawl, a house that Gavin and Jasmine had never touched. I walked back to the front door of the mansion. The staff was leaving, filing out with their boxes, looking at me with resentment. I watched them go. I felt nothing. I took the keys to the house off my ring. I placed them on the table in the foyer. I looked around one last time. I looked at the marble floors I had imported. I looked at the chandeliers I had hung. It was a beautiful house, a masterpiece of construction. But it was not a home. It was just a pile of expensive rocks. I walked out the front door and closed it firmly behind me. I did not lock it. It was not my problem anymore. I got into my car and started the engine. As I drove down the driveway past the broken gates, I felt the weight of the last 20 years lifting off my shoulders. I was 68 years old. I had been poisoned, betrayed, and broken. But as I turned onto the main road heading toward the hospital, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt young. I had a wife who loved me. I had 2 sons who needed me. I had a fortune that was safe. And most importantly, I had the truth. The fallout was over. The dust had settled. And now it was time to build something new. Something that would last. It has been 6 months since I walked out of the ballroom at the Palmer House, leaving my old life behind on the stage floor. 6 months since I traded the cold marble of a mansion for the warm oak floors of a single-story ranch house on the edge of the city. The new house is not grand. It does not have a heated swimming pool or a 10-car garage. It does not have a wing for servants or a gallery for art. But it has something the estate never had. It has sunlight that reaches every corner. It has windows that open to let in the breeze. And most importantly, it has noise. I used to value silence. I used to think that a quiet house was a sign of order and control. I was a fool. Silence is the sound of a tomb. Now my mornings begin at 5 o'clock, not with an alarm or a meeting, but with the sound of crying. It is a double siren wail that echoes down the hallway. To anyone else, it might be annoying. To me, it is the most beautiful symphony ever composed. It is the sound of life. It is the sound of my sons, Marcus and Leo, demanding their breakfast. I rolled over in bed. My joints still ached in the morning dampness, a lingering reminder of the thallium that once coursed through my veins. The doctors say the tremors will fade eventually, but even if they don't, I do not mind. They are battle scars. They are reminders that I survived the war. Kendra was already stirring beside me. She looked tired. Her hair was messy, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of expensive cream could hide. But when she looked at me, she smiled. It was a real smile. It wasn't the fearful, guarded smile she used to wear when Gavin was watching. It was the smile of a woman who felt safe. "I will get them," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "You sleep." I got up and walked to the nursery. I did not shuffle. I walked with a purpose. I picked up Marcus, who was red-faced and screaming, and then I picked up Leo, who was kicking his legs. They were heavy. They were growing so fast it terrified me. I carried them into the kitchen, the morning sun spilling across the floor. I made bottles. I changed diapers. Me, Alonzo Hayes, the man who used to bark orders at foremen and make million-dollar deals over lunch, was now wiping spit up off his shoulder and humming lullabies. And I have never been happier. We do not have a staff anymore. No housekeeper, no chef, no gardener. We do it all ourselves. When the grass needs cutting, I cut it. When the dishes need washing, I wash them. There is a dignity in this work that I had forgotten. When you pay someone else to live your life for you, you lose touch with the texture of existence. You forget what soap smells like. You forget the weight of a trash bag. You forget that life is made up of these small, necessary acts of service. I looked out the kitchen window. In the corner of the yard under a young maple tree was a small wooden marker. That was where I reburied Duke. Every morning I drink my coffee and I look at that spot. I talk to him. I tell him that the bad man is gone. I tell him that the house is safe now. I tell him that he did not die in vain. Later that afternoon I sat on the back porch watching Kendra play with the boys on a blanket in the grass. The air was crisp and clean. I thought about the letters that come from the prison. Gavin writes every week. He begs, he threatens, he bargains. He sends long ramblings about how he found God and how he is a changed man. I burn them unopened in the fireplace. Jasmine writes too. She complains about the food. She complains about the noise. She asks for more money. I file those letters away in a box in the garage. I do not answer them. I have spent a lot of time thinking about family these last few months. I used to think family was blood. I thought that because Jasmine carried my DNA, she possessed my values. I thought that because Gavin married my daughter, he shared my honor. I was wrong. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. It does not guarantee loyalty. It does not guarantee love. And it certainly does not guarantee character. I looked at Kendra laughing as Leo pulled her hair. She was not born a Hayes. She came from a different world. But she stood by me when the fire came. She trusted me when I told her to play along. She is more family to me than the people who share my last name ever were. And Brutus. He comes over every Sunday for a barbecue. He brings beer and tells stories about the old days. He holds the twins with hands that could crush stone and looks at them with pure adoration. He is not my blood. He is my brother. I have learned that you build a family the same way you build a skyscraper. You do not just throw materials together and hope they stick. You choose them carefully. You test them under pressure. You bond them with sweat and trust. And if you find a cracked brick, if you find a piece of steel that is rusting from the inside, you cut it out. You cut it out before it brings the whole structure down. It is a harsh lesson. It cost me my relationship with my daughter. It cost me my innocence. But it saved my life. I finished my coffee and stood up. My knees popped, but I felt strong. I walked out into the yard. I had a project to finish. I had been building a low stone wall around the garden. It was not necessary. The fence was secure, but I needed to build. My hands missed the feel of the trowel and the rough texture of the brick. I mixed a small batch of mortar in a wheelbarrow. The smell of the wet cement took me back 40 years. It took me back to the days when I was just a laborer with a strong back and a dream. Back before the money. Back before the complications. I picked up a brick. It was red and heavy. I buttered it with mortar, flipping the trowel with a wrist motion that was as natural to me as breathing. I set the brick in place. I tapped it level. Alonzo Kendra called out. I looked up. She was holding Marcus walking toward me. He wants to see what Daddy is doing, she said. She handed me the boy. I held him in one arm, my other hand holding the trowel. He looked at the tool with wide, curious eyes. He reached out a tiny, chubby hand and grabbed the handle. I covered his small hand with my large, rough one. "This is a trowel, son," I whispered to him. "This is how we build." I guided his hand. We scooped up a little bit of mortar. We slapped it onto the wall. It was messy. It was crooked. But it was perfect. "You see this," I told him, pointing to the wall. "This is real. You can touch it. You can lean on it. It will protect you from the wind." He looked at me and giggled. He did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. "I am going to teach you everything I said. I am not going to just leave you a bank account, Marcus. Money is easy to lose. Money makes people lazy. Money makes people cruel. I am going to leave you something better. I am going to leave you a trade. I am going to teach you how to work. I am going to teach you how to sweat. Because when you know how to build with your own hands, you never have to be afraid of losing everything. You can always start over." I looked at Kendra. She was watching us with tears in her eyes. She knew what this moment meant. It was not just playtime. It was an inauguration. I thought about Gavin sitting in his cell dreaming of the millions he lost. He never understood the value of the work. He only wanted the prize. He wanted the penthouse, but he did not want to pour the foundation. That is why he fell. My sons will be different. They will know the value of $1 because they will know the weight of the brick that earned it. I set Marcus down on the grass. I picked up the trowel again. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the new garden. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of soil and cement and peace. My name is Alonzo Hayes. I am 69 years old. I have been poisoned. I have been betrayed. I have been left for dead. But I am still standing. I am still building. And for the first time in a long time, I am looking forward to tomorrow. Thank you for listening to my story. It was a hard road, but I walked it so you would know that it is never too late to take out the trash and rebuild your life. Justice is not something you ask for. It is something you build brick by brick. If you have ever had to cut toxic people out of your life to save yourself, let me know in the comments below. Tell me where you are watching from. And do not forget to like and subscribe. We are building a community here, a family of survivors. Until next time, keep your foundation strong and watch your back. But most importantly, never ever underestimate the power of a man with nothing left to lose but his dignity. I learned that age does not make you weak. It makes you experienced. People like Gavin mistake kindness for blindness. They think that because you are quiet, you are not paying attention. But the most dangerous element in any room is the man who listens more than he speaks. I also learned that you can lose everything. Your house, your pride, your false friends, and still come out richer if you have the people who truly love you by your side. A foundation built on lies will always crumble no matter how pretty the paint is. But a life built on truth stands forever. If you believe that family is about loyalty and not just blood, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.